The country girl, who didn't know she was the daughter of a chaebol, could only eat plain rice every day. It was because on her first day of school in the city, she had enviously glanced at the food in her classmates' bowl that Soya didn't expect but was beaten up by her classmates. Soya, who never gives up, even hit back. This scene shocked the other students around her, who were dumbfounded. Ari is a well-known second-generation rich girl. No one in the school has ever dared to lay a hand on her. This made Ari cry bitterly. However, when they arrived at the office, the teacher, due to Ari's family background, knew it was Ari's fault but let Soya take the punishment alone. Ari's mother rushed to the school to mediate the conflict between the children. The teacher wanted to curry favor with the chaebol wife and in front of her, she gave Soya another beating. She mercilessly whipped Soya's body. Ari's mother couldn't bear to watch and directly stopped the teacher's cruel behavior. She rebuked the teacher, saying that it was normal for children to have arguments. Soya did not know that the chaebol lady in front of her was her biological mother. After an 11-year separation, this was the first time the mother and daughter had contact. Although they were close, they did not know the relationship between mother and daughter. It is said that a mother and son are connected at heart. The lady saw Soya in front of her and inadvertently felt a very kind feeling in her heart. And Soya was also very strange about why she felt an inexplicable feeling in her heart when she saw the lady in front of her. However, after this incident, Soya did not hold a grudge against anyone and was as cheerful and lively as usual. After school, she accidentally came to a hill facing the sea. She was deeply moved by the vast sea and huge cargo ships in the distance. Soya wanted to run to the bottom of the hill to watch up close. Unexpectedly, a man stopped her in her tracks. Soya felt an inexplicable fear from the bottom of her heart when she saw the man, but she didn't know that the man in front of her was her father's murderer. After the man left, Soya immediately put on her happy smile again, admiring the scenery she had never seen before in the distance. In the evening, Soya sold the empty bottles she had picked up to get some money, and bought 2 pieces of white tofu to make a sumptuous dinner. This was the first time the family had eaten such a good meal since they arrived in the city. Soya was a particularly sensible child. Because of the family's poverty, when serving the rice, she gave her own share to her brother and sister. At the dinner table, her adoptive father asked Soya why she wasn't eating, but she lied and said that on the way back, her classmates had invited her to eat bread, while her adoptive mother on the side blamed Soya for not bringing some to her younger sister, and angrily told Soya to sleep on the floor outside tonight. Only the adoptive father pitied Soya, and strongly opposed his wife's approach, so they had a quarrel. Soya didn't want to see her parents argue because of her, so she told them that she liked sleeping on the floor. That way she could roll around without restraint and sleep however she wanted. After dinner, Soya cleaned all the dishes in the house and then went outside to sleep on the floor alone. Her adoptive father, who was worried that Soya would catch a cold, also went outside. The next day, Soya went out to collect empty bottles as usual to supplement the family income. Ari saw her and told Soya that her family had a lot of empty bottles. She wanted to show off her wealth in front of Soya in this way. When she arrived at Ari's house, Soya saw a large pile of empty bottles. This made Soya very happy. In order to further show off her family's wealth to satisfy her vanity, Ari also took Soya to her home and even picked up her father's huge vase worth tens of millions to show off. Soya wanted to see what kind of vase could be worth tens of millions and tried to catch it to take a good look. Unexpectedly, Ari, who was scheming, deliberately let go of it before Soya could catch it. The vase fell directly to the ground and broke into pieces. At this time, the lady, who heard the sound, hurried over. Ari quickly shirked the blame, saying that she didn't break it. Soya was so scared that she squatted down on the ground, trying to put the vase back together. The lady suddenly saw the scar on Soya's neck. She felt a sense of déjà vu. She questioned Soya if she broke the vase. Soya hurriedly and nervously said that she didn't do it. At this moment, Ari suddenly felt a sharp pain in her leg. She quickly pouted at her mother. The lady was heartbroken and quickly pulled Ari onto the sofa and asked the maid to bring the first aid kit. She carefully bandaged Ari's leg, for fear that the wound would heal if she delayed. Meanwhile, Soya, who had been treated coldly by her adoptive mother at home all day, couldn't help feeling aggrieved when she saw her mother doting on Ari, because at home, she had never received any motherly love since she was little. After treating Ari's wound, the mistress then flew into a rage with Soya, and scolded her for not even apologizing after Ari had been hurt. Soya quickly apologized and explained that she really didn't break the vase. However, the madam believed that Soya was lying and had reached the point of no return. She said she was going to take Soya to meet her parents. Soya was worried that the madam would make her parents pay for the vase, so she was scared and could only keep explaining. The madam was so angry at Soya that she didn't know what to say. Just then, the nanny discovered that Soya's leg was also injured and bleeding. The large wound stunned the lady. Ari, who was watching, was probably really scared. She cried and told her mother that she had broken the vase and lied. The lady was very guilty and looked at Soya. She realized that her misunderstanding might have caused Soya a lot of harm. To express her apology, she let Soya stay and have dinner with her. Looking at the table full of delicious food she had never eaten before, Soya was not polite. She opened her mouth wide and ate a little here and tried a little there. Seeing this, Her brother looked disgusted and asked Ari where she had brought back a beggar from. Soya immediately stopped eating when she heard this, and remembered that in her family, eating a meal of boiled tofu was a luxury. Here, the delicacies of the mountains and the sea were just everyday meals. The huge gap in their lives made Soya feel very uncomfortable for a while. After the meal, Soya did not forget to take a few empty bottles back with her. She understood that a life of abundance could only be achieved through her own hard work. When she arrived home, her adoptive father had been waiting anxiously outside for a long time. Just as she let her heart drop, she suddenly saw that Soya had an injury on her leg. He thought that Soya had caused it while picking up bottles to supplement the family income. This made her adoptive father feel guilty and also feel incredibly self-blame. So he told Soya not to pick up bottles anymore in the future. Her father had now found a job at a shipyard and could support the family. Soya was very happy for her father. When he returned home, he saw that Soya had difficulty walking and insisted on carrying her home, although she was not his daughter. Soya had taken care of the family for many years, which made him feel guilty. His adoptive father had long since regarded Soya as his own daughter. However, Soya had always thought that her adoptive father in front of her was her real father, because when he first brought Soya home, he told his wife that she was his illegitimate daughter. Soya's adoptive mother has always treated her coldly and resented her. Soya's visit to Ari's house today made Butler Kim feel scared when he saw it. If Chairman Park finds out Soya's identity, his family will all lose their lives. He went to the adoptive father's house at night to question him why he is still here. But at this time, the adoptive father's wife is about to give birth to her third child, so there is nowhere else to go. Butler Kim had to ask the adoptive father to keep Soya away from Chairman Park's house. He lied and said that Chairman Park was someone who didn't like strange children very much, and that he was also living under someone else's roof. So he didn't want to make things difficult for himself. So June, who didn't know the truth, had no choice but to agree. However, the adoptive father then became suspicious from what Soya had learned. Soya told her father that Chairman Park was a very warm-hearted person who had been very kind to her. The adoptive father couldn't understand what Butler Kim was afraid of and why he had lied to him. However, before he could figure out the truth, the debt collectors came knocking on the door the next day, so her adoptive father had to kneel on the ground and beg the other party to give him some more time. The burly man angrily kicked the adoptive father out of the way with one foot. Soya hurriedly and anxiously went up to check on her father's condition. Seeing her father in pain, she instantly became furious. In order to protect her father from further harm, Soya fearlessly stepped in front of the burly man. However, the man simply pushed the weak Soya aside and she fell to the ground. Seeing her daughter being bullied, the adoptive father endured the pain and went up to argue with the man, but was again knocked to the ground by a fierce punch. And then a group of people began to wildly punch and kick the adoptive father. Soya, distressed, rushed up to her father and bit down hard on the man's foot. The angry man finally wanted to take Soya away as payment for his debt. Soya was so scared that she kept shouting for her father. So June, watching his beloved daughter being taken away, quickly got up from the ground and chased after her. He wanted to snatch his daughter back from the man's hands, but was once again hit hard by the other party and knocked to the ground. Soya took a bite and grabbed her man's hand to break free. She hurried to her father to check on his condition. The man who was bitten was completely enraged and threatened to kill Soya. Sujun jumped up from the ground at the sound of his voice and stood in front of Soya to protect her. But Soya was not the least bit intimidated by the man's words. Instead, she walked up to her father to protect him. She told the man that it was fine if he wanted to take her as payment, but he could not hurt her father again, or she would bite her tongue and kill herself right here, and threatened to become a vengeful ghost haunting them forever. The man didn't expect such a little girl to be so difficult, and had to promise to give him a few more days. Sujun would then repay the money with interest. Sujun sat down and burst into tears after seeing them go far away. He blamed himself for getting Soya into trouble, and letting Soya, who was adopted, not have a good life with him. The sensible Soya kept comforting her father on the side, and cried along with him when she saw how sad he looked. The next day, Soya knew that her father had been feeling guilty about what happened yesterday, and specially cooked some eggs to take to her father's workplace for him to eat, so that he could recover his injured body as soon as possible. Looking at her father's depressed appearance, Soya understood that he must be worrying about repaying the money. She told her father lovingly that she would use the money she earned from bottle picking to repay the money she owed her father. "Dad, don't be sad. Otherwise, I will also be sad with you." As she spoke, Sujun was moved to tears by Soya's words. The adoptive father thought about how Soya had always dreamed of going to sea on a boat and experiencing the charm of the sea. So he took the boat and drove Soya out to sea. Sujun really hoped that Soya could become his own daughter. But things did not go as he wished. The mark of blood ties is something that can never be changed. But he swore in his heart that no matter what happened, he would never let Soya get hurt again, and that Soya would always be his daughter. Later, when Soya was about to return, she met her classmate Hae-jin. The entire shipyard here belongs to Hae-jin's grandfather, and Hae-jin has inherited his grandfather's dream of loving shipbuilding. After learning that Soya is good at welding, he came to her to learn. Ari, who has always secretly loved Hae-jin, also came to this place at this time. Ari came to invite Heijin to her home, but Heijin's heart was only with Soya. He said that if Soya didn't go, he wouldn't go either. Soya was invited by Heijin to Ari's home again. Soya was very happy to see the exquisite snacks. She could feast again, but just as Soya was eating and getting carried away, Butler Kim returned with his son Taejun. When he saw Soya appear here again, he was shocked, but at this time, he could not blatantly drive Soya away. He could only wait with bated breath for the meal to end as soon as possible. After finishing the meal, Soya also brought back some pastries to try them out on her younger sister. Unexpectedly, she saw her father, who was supposed to be working at the shipyard, rushing out of the house. After asking, she learned with horror from her father that her younger sister had lost. Soya's adoptive mother lost her temper when she came back to see Soya and slapped her in anger. She blamed Soya for losing her sister. The adoptive mother grabbed Soya by the hair with all her strength and tried to beat her to death. The adoptive father hurriedly pulled his wife away and protected Soya behind him. What did Soya have to do with her sister going missing? But the adoptive mother just thought that Soya had gone to her classmate's house for dinner and didn't look after her sister, which caused, just as she was about to beat Soya again, her lost sister appeared behind her mother. Confused, and the adoptive mother immediately put on a loving expression and ran to hug her sister. Watching her adoptive mother's meticulous love for her sister, Soya held back her tears and felt extremely distressed. Ever since she was young, she had hoped to receive her mother's love, but no matter how hard she tried, all she ever got in return was her mother's disgust. Soya picked up the hairpin that had fallen to the ground, saddened, and ran out with a painful heart. But the positive and optimistic Soya did not develop hatred towards her mother because of this. Instead, she went to the top of the mountain and faced the sea to cheer herself up. When Soya dried her tears, she noticed that there was another person standing not far away. Taejun had also come to this place to vent his sadness. It turned out that he was an excellent student, but the trick of fate made him really unable to accept the current living environment. Taejun and his father have always lived under the roof of Chairman Park. His father is often beaten by Chairman Park for trivial matters, and at this time, he is completely unable to help his father, and because he is good at studying, the son of Chairman Park always mercilessly humiliates him. Over the years, filling Taejun's heart with resentment. At this time, he looked at the huge shipyard in the distance, and he vowed to Soya that one day all the shipyards here would be his. The entanglement of fate has separated them since childhood, but in the future they will be tightly bound together. The furious Butler Kim once again confronted Sujun, asking why he had not yet taken Soya away from there. But Sujun never understood what Soya had done wrong. Why was Butler Kim so afraid of Soya going to Chairman Park's house? But how could Butler Kim tell Sujun anything? He just told him that if Soya did not leave, then all of them would be in danger. It is because of the repeated threats from Butler Kim that Sujun finally feels that there must be something fishy. He remembers that when Butler Kim entrusted Soya to him, he gave him a lot of money and told him to take Soya and leave here forever. At this moment, Sujun suddenly realized something. He hurriedly ran to the shipyard and asked the old employees here if Chairman Park had ever lost a child. When the old employee heard this, he slapped his hands together and remembered what happened back then. Sujun was told that Chairman Park's wife had entrusted the 2-year-old child to Butler Kim 11 years ago. Unfortunately, the child had died in an accident at the beach and there was no trace of his remains. This news shocked Sujun into silence. He realized that the daughter he had raised for more than 10 years might be the child lost by Chairman Park. Soya, who should have been enjoying a happy life, had been suffering by his side for more than 10 years. With a heart full of doubts, Sujun wanted to find Butler Kim and ask for an answer. At this time, Madam's luxury car happened to come back. Sujun saw this and hurriedly hid in the distance, and just happened to see Madam and her daughter happily. This made his heart feel very uncomfortable. Originally, everything in front of him, Soya should also have, but now she is living a miserable life. Sujun found Butler Kim and took him to the back mountain. He beat him up severely. Angrily, he questioned Butler Kim why he had let Soya, who should have been enjoying happiness, get to the point she is now. How could he let Soya face her relatives without knowing anything? Butler Kim didn't expect Sujun to know the secret of Soya's identity, but Butler Kim said that even if he had to kill himself, he would never tell the real reason. There was nothing Sujun could do but leave with a heavy heart. On the way, he met Soya, who had just returned from catching loaches. Seeing Soya, who was covered in dirt, an inexplicable anger welled up in him. A child who should have a worry-free life is suffering for his family at this age. Soya is always the last to eat, as his siblings eat first, even when faced with his mother's jealous favoritism. Soya never resents her. Sojun, unable to sleep late at night, sits quietly outside. He doesn't understand what danger is keeping Soya from returning to his biological parents. One day, the children are attracted to a luxury yacht docked on the shore. They were all drawn to the luxury yacht moored at the shore. They went to the driver's seat and found that the key was still inside. A little girl, driven by curiosity, directly twisted the key and started the engine. The yacht immediately sped off like a runaway horse towards the depths of the sea. Fortunately, Soya had learned how to sail from her father. She took the wheel and stabilized the yacht's direction, since the boat was already sailing and someone knew how to sail it. The group excitedly thought about sailing around the sea and coming back. Little did they know that they would pay a heavy price for this fun. At this time, the maintenance worker on the shore was very puzzled. Why did the leaking yacht that was being repaired just drive away so quickly? On the other side, Soya, who was having a great time, had an accident right away. After the yacht drove into the depths of the sea, it stalled due to lack of fuel. Just as they were anxious, an even greater danger came. The seawater had already entered the hull of the yacht through the hole. If they didn't think of a way, the ship would completely sink in no time. Soya tried to call for help on the walkie-talkie, but there was no signal. There was nothing they could do. So they had to try to bail out the water inside the boat and wait for help. But things did not go as planned. This method did not work at all, and the water was getting more and more. But they did not give up hope of survival. They each put on their life jackets and prepared to wait for help after the yacht sank and floated on the sea. This is the price you pay for being playful. In the vast sea with no end in sight, without rescue they are dead. The four can only helplessly float in the sea, slowly waiting for hope to live. It wasn't until nightfall that Chairman Park's family and Soo-jun discovered that the children had disappeared. They immediately began organizing personnel to prepare for a search and rescue at sea. But the sea was dark under the night sky. Soya saw a rescue boat in the distance and hurriedly shouted for help. But the distance was too far to carry the sound to the rescue boat. At this time, dark clouds gathered and it started pouring, which made it even more unlikely that they would be found. The search continued until daybreak. But the four children were nowhere to be found. Only the wreckage of the yacht was found. This made them feel desperate. They thought that the children might have already died. Just when everyone was in agony, there came some good news. The two children were found. Seeing hope, everyone hurried towards their goal without stopping. But while some rejoiced, others were saddened. The two children found were only Soya and Taejun. Ari and Haejin had disappeared without a trace. This made Madame despair again and fainted directly. Soya and Taejun, who were rescued, fell into a coma and must be treated immediately. But Madame and Haejin's grandfather must make Soya wake up and ask Ari where they are. He doesn't care about Soya's lives at all and absolutely will not allow them to leave. This made Soo-jun furious. Is his own daughter not important? And said he was going to turn the boat around to save his daughter. An angry Chairman Park took out a pistol and threatened Soo-jun. Soo-jun remembered what Butler Kim had said about Soya's life being in danger if her identity was revealed, and did not tell the truth. Fortunately, at this time, Soya, who had been unconscious, woke up and spoke Ari's location. This incident was a close call, and all four children were successfully rescued. However, the person who was most seriously injured among the four children was Ari. She has been in a coma and has not come to. This made Madame feel extremely painful. At this time, Soya, who is in better physical condition, came to visit Ari and happened to meet the sad Madame. When Madame learned that Soya was the one who drove the boat, she blamed all the responsibility on Soya and slapped her hard. Soo-jun hid on the side and painfully watched the scene of Soya being scolded by Madame. That was Soya's own mother. Because they did not know each other's identities, Soya was punished like this. After returning home, Soya's adoptive mother had a fight with Soo-jun over the trouble Soya had caused today. She even directly cursed Soya, wondering why Soya hadn't died in the accident. This way, her own child could have had one more mouth to feed. Facing such a wife, Soo-jun didn't want to argue with her. He sulked outside. Unexpectedly, he saw Soya standing outside with tears in her eyes. Soya had heard everything her adoptive mother had said. Soya finally confirmed her suspicions. She really wasn't her mother's biological daughter. She had never loved her all these years because she wasn't her biological daughter. Soo-jun didn't want to hurt Soya's feelings and tried to defend himself. But Soya told her father that she had actually expected this result. So she had always been trying to find a way to make her mother happy. Soo-jun finally understood the heavy psychological burden Soya had been carrying for so many years. At this moment, Soya finally asked the question she had been afraid to ask. She longs to have a mother of her own to experience the tender maternal love. After she comes to her senses, Ari feels very guilty as she sees everyone scolding Soya. She then blames herself for causing the accident in order to show off her wealth. She explains that if it weren't for Soya saving them, they might really have left this world forever this time. To express her apologies, Madame specially invites the Soya family to come to her home as guests. But at this time, Soo-jun is still preoccupied. He watched Ari and Chairman Park's daughter happily together, and then looked at Soya, who was suffering, and then looked at his wife sitting on the side. He fantasized that Soya had returned to her biological parents and was living a happy life. Just then, his adoptive mother saw Soya, who was engrossed in eating, and she immediately felt unhappy. She scolded Soya for ignoring her sleeping younger sister. Soo-jun didn't want Soya to be treated like this in front of her biological mother. He hurriedly told his son to hold his sister. The adoptive mother was immediately unhappy. She was worried about her son and wanted him to eat more. She insisted that Soya hold her sister in her arms while she slept. Unexpectedly, Ari couldn't stand by and watch. She spoke her mind and asked Soya, "Aren't you her biological child?" Butler Kim was afraid that the adoptive mother would admit that Soya was not her biological child. But Butler Kim's attempt to stop her angered the adoptive mother. She thought that she was in control of her own daughter. So why should some outsider give her orders? She had no manners at all. She scolded others without restraint. Does being rich make you so special? The adoptive mother wanted to continue scolding Soya in front of everyone, dragging her down for the rest of her life. But before she could finish her sentence, Seo-jun, who had been standing by, couldn't hold back his anger anymore. This was supposed to be a happy gathering, but it was ruined by the vicious adoptive mother. Madam felt that Soya still felt apologetic after all the misunderstandings. Before leaving, she gave Soya an expensive dress. Soya, who had never worn new clothes before, looked at herself in the mirror and beamed like a child. Seo-jun watched the scene and felt very uncomfortable. This happiness should have belonged to Soya, but now Soya was living with him, going hungry and barely getting enough to eat. When she got home, her adoptive mother was jealous of Soya's new and expensive clothes, so she forced Soya to take the clothes off and sell them to help with the household expenses. This was the first time Soya had worn new clothes, so how could she bear to sell them? Seo-jun was furious at his wife's actions. Late at night, he was distressed as he watched Soya sleeping on the cold floor. Seo-jun knew that if Soya continued to stay by his side, she would definitely suffer for the rest of her life. He definitely did not want to see such a sensible and obedient child be ruined by his own hands, so he decided in his heart to give Soya back the life that was originally hers. Then Seo-jun took out Soya's clothes from when she was a child, and went to Chairman Park's office early the next morning to tell him about Soya's background. However, Seo-jun did not know that Chairman Park was the one who ordered Soya's murder. If he knew that the child he ordered to be killed had not died, he wondered what terrible things this vicious man would do again, and the adoptive father would also lose his life because of this incident. When Seo-jun took Soya's childhood clothes to Chairman Park to identify them, Chairman Park, with a strong hold on his shock, said expressionlessly that he did not recognize the child's clothes. Seo-jun thought that it had been too long and that Chairman Park might have forgotten. He eagerly asked Chairman Park to take a good look and think carefully. Chairman Park still directly denied and angrily rebuked Seo-jun for being unreasonable. If he let his wife remember the painful past, he threatened that he would never let him go. Seeing that things had come to this, Seo-jun had no choice but to leave. However, as soon as Seo-jun left, Chairman Park's hands began to tremble uncontrollably. The reason was that the shirt he was holding was the shirt of the child he had ordered to be killed. He was terrified that his wife would find out what he had done. In order to find out what was going on, Chairman Park took the butler, who had personally killed Soya, to the beach and interrogated him. The butler never expected Seo-jun to go directly to Chairman Park. However, no matter how Chairman Park tortured him, the butler never told the truth. Butler Kim knew very well that if he admitted that he had not killed the child, Chairman Park would not only kill him, but also his son, in order to save his family. Butler Kim made an incredibly evil decision at this time. He told Chairman Park that back then, because he could not bear to kill the wife's child, he handed the child over to Seo-jun to kill. That was why Seo-jun had the child's clothes. And at this time, Seo-jun must have brought the clothes to get some money from Chairman Park. Chairman Park did not believe what Butler Kim said right away, but instead asked Butler Kim to bring Seo-jun to him so that they could confront each other face to face. Butler Kim felt an unprecedented fear in his heart. If he really brought Seo-jun to Chairman Park would definitely recognize his lies, and in that case, the end that awaited himself and his son would only be death. Meanwhile, Seo-jun also received an important piece of news. Seo-jun found Dr. Yoon, who had been helping him, and asked about the child that Chairman Park had lost back then. Although Dr. Yoon was puzzled as to why Seo-jun was curious about Chairman Park, he still told him that the child lost that year was born to the wife and her ex-husband. The reason why the current Dr. Yoon knew so much about what happened back then was that this Dr. Yoon was the younger brother of the man killed by Chairman Park back then. In other words, the man in front of him was Soya's uncle. However, at this time, they did not know this relationship. After Seo-jun came out, after thinking carefully about what Dr. Yoon had said, he suddenly understood something. Then Butler Kim took out a sum of money and hoped that Seo-jun would take Soya and leave the place quickly. Although Seo-jun really needed money to live and pay off his debts, he thought that Soya would have a hard life if she stayed with him, so he returned the money. Seo-jun said that he really couldn't do anything that went against the natural order of things and separate a mother from her child. He thought that Butler Kim definitely meant for him to leave the place, which was what Chairman Park wanted. He is afraid that Soya's appearance will damage the marital relationship between Chairman Park and his wife. Seo-jun decides to find the wife personally and ask her the truth about Soya's identity. Butler Kim absolutely will not allow such a thing to happen. He picks up a large stone on the ground and glares at Seo-jun as he leaves, perhaps thinking that the place is not safe. He puts the stone back on the ground. Butler Kim calls out to Seo-jun and deceives him, telling him to meet him at the pier tonight and get the wife out there himself. Seo-jun agrees, thinking that Soya might have to go back to her real mother's side tonight. Seo-jun felt unbearable pain in his heart. He took Soya and set sail again to the open sea. Soya, no matter where you go in the future, remember that you still have us. Your family. Soya sensed her father's unusual emotions. It felt like they were going to part forever. But Soya didn't know that her sixth sense was very accurate, because this time would be the last time they would be together as father and daughter. That night, Soo-jun came to the pier as agreed. Butler Kim, who had been waiting for a long time, saw Soo-jun and immediately started the car, and drove straight at Soo-jun with the accelerator. At this time, Soya, who had come to find her father, also appeared here. Butler Kim gave up killing Soo-jun at the last minute and changed direction. Unexpectedly, Soya's sudden appearance made Butler Kim drive the car again and hit Soo-jun. Soo-jun, who was rushed to the hospital, held on to his last breath and wanted to tell Soya the truth. He felt deeply guilty for making Soya suffer so much over the years. At the last moment of his life, he wanted Soya to receive true maternal love. Soo-jun was about to tell Soya who her real mother was, when Madam, who had come to visit after hearing about Soo-jun's accident, appeared. Soo-jun raised his hand with difficulty and pointed at Madam. But the seriously injured man no longer had the strength to tell the truth that the lady was Soya's biological mother. In the midst of endless guilt and self-blame, he left this world forever, leaving behind his family. Unfortunately, Soya did not know the meaning of her father's final gesture towards the lady. The biological mother and daughter, who were so close, once again missed the opportunity to recognize each other. At Soo-jun's funeral, Butler Kim offered a stick of incense with trembling hands, deeply feeling guilty. He also did not expect how things would end up like this. On the other side, Soo-jun's wife was in pain. She only knew regret after losing her husband. She did not properly treat him when he was alive. What made her even more difficult to accept was that from then on, there was no longer any income in the family, not to mention that she was pregnant with a child that was about to be born, and there were also the debts that her husband owed before he died. This made the already poor family even more miserable. Soya scattered her father's ashes into the sea. Her father's death was a huge blow to Soya. Ever since she was young, her father loved and encouraged her. No matter if Soya was happy or sad, her father would always be by her side. Soya went upstairs and cried her heart out with her father's love. Meanwhile, Butler Kim was finally relieved on President Park's side. If Soo-jun died, no one would know the truth that Soya was the biological daughter of the lady. Just in case, President Park still asked Butler Kim to find the child's clothes in Soo-jun's hands and destroy them. She must never find out what happened to her daughter all those years ago. Butler Kim took advantage of the funeral to sneak into the house. No matter how hard he looked, he couldn't find the dress. What he didn't know was that Soya had found it earlier and was holding it in her hands. That night, the police came to Soya's house to investigate the circumstances of Soo-jun's accident. Soya then painfully revealed the truth that it was because of her that her father had an accident. Her adoptive mother was furious. She already hated Soya. Her adoptive mother immediately wanted to kick Soya out, and told the other children that Soya was their father's murderer. The sensible Soya knew that she could not leave the family now. However, no matter how painfully Soya begged, her adoptive mother insisted on kicking her out. Soya, who had nowhere to go under the night sky, took her luggage and went to the seaside where her father was buried. Standing in the pouring rain, crying and asking her father what she should do, she stood there all night. The next day, Taejun and Haejin hurriedly took Soya, who was already unconscious with a fever, back home. Her foster mother didn't show the slightest bit of concern when she saw Soya. Instead, she told Taejun to take Soya away, saying that she had nothing to do with her anymore. Haejin couldn't stand by and watched, saying that she would report her to the police for child abuse. This scared her adoptive mother. Soya heard that the police were going to be called and quickly got off Taejun's back despite her discomfort. She apologized to her adoptive mother, hoping that she would not kick her out. This is her home. What her adoptive mother didn't expect was that if Soya left this time, the baby in her belly would be lost. In the evening, Soya woke up and was having dinner, while her adoptive mother suddenly felt severe pain in her stomach and realized she was about to give birth. Obeying her mother's instructions, the son immediately went to call the grandmother next door to come and deliver the baby. However, when he arrived at the door, he was stopped by a vicious dog tied at the door. After a long time, the adoptive mother could no longer hold on as she had not seen the midwife arrive. Soya glanced at her mother's situation and discovered that the baby's head had already come out. In a hurry, Soya had no choice but to deliver the baby herself. Soya tightly held her adoptive mother's hand and told her to breathe deeply. Amidst the loud and clear cries of a baby for the first time in her life, the adoptive mother successfully gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Soya held the baby in her arms and couldn't stop loving it. The sensible girl even turned her grief into motivation at this time, telling her adoptive mother, "Although we have lost our father, heaven has allowed our family to have another member." Dad once said that the only real family is the one that has experienced sadness, grief and hunger together. I will raise this younger sister well on behalf of Dad. However, heaven did not pity Soya's family, because the ambitious Chairman Park has always wanted to acquire Grandpa Haejin's shipyard. He played some tricks behind his back and tricked Grandpa Haejin. Not only did Chairman Park own the shipyard, but he also owned the village near the shipyard, and Soya's family lives in this village. Now, in order to expand his business, Chairman Park has asked Butler Kim to lead a team to forcibly demolish the village. Recently, facing the death of her husband and the birth of a new life. Now she is about to lose her home, which makes her adoptive mother feel like she has nothing to live for. The sensible Soya took on all the responsibilities at this time. In order to let her adoptive mother eat nutritious food, Soya sold the clothes that her wife gave her and exchanged them for some food for her adoptive mother, while she herself only drank a little water to satisfy her hunger every day. Fortunately, Jimin's concern gave Soya some breathing space, and knowing that Soya hadn't eaten for a long time, she made some food for her to eat. During this time, Soya found a letter addressed to Eunju in Jimin's place. After inquiring curiously, Soya learned that Eunju was Jimin's niece. However, Jimin did not know that the Soya in front of her was the Eunju mentioned in the letter. This letter was written by Jimin's brother, Soya's father, to Eunju. The letter was full of words of a father's love and care for his daughter. Although Soya didn't know that this was written to her, she was still deeply moved by the emotional connection in the letter. Jimin looked at the tearful Soya and knew that she missed her father, so he went up to her and comforted her in his arms. Just then, Chuehua also arrived and announced some good news. Chairman Park had agreed to compensate the villagers for the demolition. It turned out that Jimin had previously gone to his ex-wife. The villages there were all established by Jimin's brother. He asked his wife not to do anything that would make her feel guilty towards her ex-husband and to stop Park from his barbaric actions. That night, the wife lost her temper with Park. There was nothing Park could do, so he ordered his men to double the compensation for the villagers. Hearing this news, Soya, who had become a demolition victim, finally revealed a smile on her face for the first time in a long time. But this smile turned into despair the next day. It was because they had only moved here for a month. In order to receive compensation, they had to live here for 20 years before they could be eligible. The family could only pack their bags in despair and helplessly set off for a life of displacement. But just then, it started raining heavily. There was nothing the people could do, so they had to go and live temporarily under the bridge. And the next thing that happened made Soya feel even more desperate. Soya boiled the little rice that was left in the house into porridge to feed her family, because there wasn't enough firewood. She wanted her brother to go outside and find some, but her brother refused on the grounds that it would get his clothes wet if it rained. Unexpectedly, just as Soya had turned to leave, her brother accidentally knocked over the pot of porridge. This tragic situation made her foster mother and younger sister unable to stop crying. Poor them. They didn't know how to continue to survive next. Only Soya held back her tears and kept comforting her foster mother not to cry and to be strong. And in her heart, she was asking where the next step was. Just then, Chuehua finally found Soya and told them to pack their things and follow him. Unexpectedly, Chuehua directly brought Soya's family to Madam and let her take responsibility, saying that Chairman Park had made them homeless and that Madam was responsible for them. It turned out that Madam was Chuehua's own sister. Looking at the miserable family in front of her, Madam was very sympathetic, but she was also a bit embarrassed to take in so many people at once. At that time, Taejun, who had been secretly in love with Soya, spoke up and said that they could live in his own house. As soon as the adoptive mother heard this, she didn't even wait to see if it was possible, and decided to live there directly for the sake of having a place for her children to take shelter from the wind and rain. The butler, Kim, on the side was so scared that he didn't know what to do, and what scared him even more was about to come. That day, Ari gave Soya a dress. Chairman Park was amused by the two girls showing off their love for each other and laughed heartily. Just then, Ari thought Soya would look better with her hair up, so Ari held up Soya's hair, but her back was exposed. Soya's burn scar directly caught Chairman Park's eye. It instantly reminded him of the burn on his late wife's dead daughter's back. To prove his suspicion, Chairman Park immediately found Soya's adoptive mother and asked if Soya was the one she adopted 11 years ago. Hearing that Chairman Park was asking about Soya's background, Butler Kim was scared and didn't know what to do. Fortunately, Soya's adoptive mother told Chairman Park that Soya was her own child born in October. Then, Chairman Park thought that he had misunderstood. He then called Butler Kim aside, who had just let out a sigh of relief, and scolded him for bringing the family of the murderer of his wife's daughter into the house. In order to prevent his wife from learning the truth, Chairman Park ordered Butler Kim to immediately find a way to evict Soya's family. Butler Kim was even more afraid of Soya living there than Chairman Park. If it was discovered that Soya was the already deceased Eunju, the consequences would be unimaginable. So he picked up the phone and told the debt collectors where Soya was living. Soon, the debt collectors quickly found out where Soya was living. When Soya and the others didn't know what to do, Butler Kim appeared and agreed to help pay off all the debts, on the condition that Soya's family returned to live in their old home in the countryside. The adoptive mother agreed to this condition without hesitation. Early the next morning, Butler Kim personally saw the Soya family off to the car and watched them leave. Butler Kim thought he could finally rest easy. In fact, this was when his real nightmare began. When the wife returned from her trip, she happened to meet the nanny and wanted to throw away the things Soya had forgotten to take with her. A yellow piece of clothing in the cardboard box suddenly caught her attention. She hurriedly stopped the nanny and grabbed the child's clothing from the cardboard box. She couldn't believe it. Her daughter had been dead for more than 10 years. So why was her daughter's clothing here? The lady was so excited that she immediately asked Butler Kim to ask Soya why her daughter's clothes were at her house. Chairman Park, afraid of revealing the truth, deliberately said that it should be the same type of clothes and that there must be a mistake. But the lady firmly said that she had made the clothes herself and there was no mistake. She suspected that her daughter might still be alive. At this point, the lady suddenly remembered the burn mark on Soya's back. She immediately guessed that Soya might be her daughter who disappeared at the beach years ago. Hearing this, Butler Kim hurriedly denied the lady's guess. In order to calm his wife's emotions, Chairman Park had to let Butler Kim take his wife to find Soya. The terrified Butler hurried home and called the debt collectors again, asking them to stop Soya from returning to her hometown. When his wife arrived at Soya's hometown, it was obvious that she had not found Soya. At this time, Soya's family was locked up by the debt collectors. No matter how Soya called for help, no one in this remote mountain village would find them. Fortunately, the foundation of this dilapidated house was not very strong. Soya dug a hole in the ground and the family successfully escaped. But the guards soon returned, and, realizing that the people had disappeared, hurriedly searched everywhere. Soya knew that it was impossible for her family to escape like this, and in order to keep her promise to her dead father to take care of her family, she decided to lure the men away herself, and let her foster mother take her brother and sister and escape from the other side. They would meet at the agreed place. At this moment, her foster mother tightly grasped Soya's hand and would not let go. She finally treated Soya like her own child. Soya assured her mother that she would definitely meet them safely. After that, she didn't hesitate to rush out and lead all the black-clad men in the other direction. Her adoptive mother looked in the direction Soya disappeared and cried uncontrollably. She regretted having neglected Soya. On the other side, the woman who was convinced that Soya was her daughter asked around outside the station for news of Soya but got nothing. The foster mother, with her child in her arms, anxiously waited inside the station for Soya to return safely. But at this time, Soya did not escape the black-clad man's pursuit and was arrested. She was to be sent abroad. Fortunately, Soya's biting skills could always come in handy in times of crisis. But after all, she was just a little girl. Still, the black-clad man forced her to the cliff by the sea, with nowhere to escape. Soya did not give up. The black-clad man who was chasing her saw the disappearing Soya and was at a loss. Soya, who had sunk to the bottom of the sea, fell into a short coma. At that moment, a picture of her with her father suddenly appeared in her mind. Soya, who was unconscious, woke up in time and surfaced. She put on her confident smile and swam towards the future. 15 years later, Soya had become a tall and graceful young woman. She had become an excellent welder and was living a happy and fulfilling life with her adoptive mother. That day, Soya went straight to the bar in order to find her younger sister. At that moment, her younger sister was dancing with a man on the dance floor. Soya was furious when she saw this scene. She walked over and grabbed the man by the collar. Soya didn't know that the man in front of her was Hae-jin, who had liked her when she was a child. 15 years later, they met again but didn't recognize each other. Soya then grabbed her sister's hair and walked out. It turned out that her sister was wearing a wig. Soya's embarrassing appearance caused the people present to laugh. When she went to pull her sister's hair again, Hae-jin tried to stop her. Unexpectedly, Soya gave her a shoulder throw and had a close encounter with the ground. Then Soya brought ice cubes and poured them all over Hae-jin's head. Finally, she warned the bar owner that if her sister came in again, she would burn the place down. It has to be said that the adult Soya is even more domineering than when she was a child. Soya dragged her sister out of the bar. Her sister was afraid that her sister would tear up the clothes she rented from the laundry. Then her sister's monthly salary would be gone. At this time, her sister took the opportunity to break free and run out. When the two were chasing, they encountered a beautiful woman. The beautiful woman wanted to go up and scold her, but when she saw the domineering Soya scolding her younger sister, she held back the words that were on the tip of her tongue. And this beautiful woman was Soya's old friend Ari. She came to the bar to find Hae-jin. For all these years, Ari has always liked Hae-jin, but Hae-jin has never felt anything for Ari. When Hae-jin returned home, he was holding a green hair clip in his hand and remembered the scene from 15 years ago, when his grandfather's shipyard was acquired by a chaebol. Hae-jin was sent abroad for further studies. When he said goodbye to Soya, he took off the hair clip on Soya's head as a kind of spiritual sustenance. Now that he has returned from his studies, he wants to take back from Chairman Park the chaebol, the company that should have belonged to his grandfather. And for these 15 years, Hae-jin has thought of Soya day and night, and Soya has been able to survive by living with her foster mother and her family for all these years. Because of what happened to her younger sister today, the pain that had been building up inside Soya finally exploded. Soya and her foster mother worked hard to raise her brother and sister. Soya even quit high school to work so that they could have a better life. Soya doesn't expect them to become successful, but she also can't stand to see them humiliate themselves shamelessly. Although her brother graduated from university, he doesn't work at home and borrows money from everywhere. Soya scolds them a little. Her brother then rebukes her for having no right to teach. Watching the quarrel between her brother and sister, their mother can only stand up and try to stop them. Even so, Soya still drags her tired body out to set up her stall and do business. She is very unhappy and feels that she is being wronged. Soya really wants to go to university. This way, after graduation, she can get a job at a better company, and then the family's life can be better. In the end, her adoptive mother still favored her biological son and chose to give up Soya's opportunity to go to university. Soya questioned her adoptive mother why she did that. The adoptive mother sighed with regret. She had high hopes for her son. She never imagined that her grown son would be such a loser. Fortunately, Soya's hard work finally paid off. That day, she finally received an invitation to an interview at the shipyard of her dreams. The owner of this shipyard is none other than the Chable Parks Company. Soya dressed up carefully. Not only was she going to an interview, but she was also meeting her boyfriend Taejun. It turns out that Soya has been in contact with Taejun all these years, and the two have secretly become lovers. Taejun has worked hard over the years and has become an enviable prosecutor. At this time, Soya, who is still Cinderella, does not want to burden Taejun, and decides to wait until she has achieved something before announcing her relationship with Taejun. Soya never expected that the one interviewing her would be Chairman Park's son, Jin Woo. Seeing Soya's resume, he even didn't graduate from high school. He scolded the staff for letting such an illiterate person into their company, but the staff told him that Soya had passed all the tests with outstanding results. However, Jin Woo, who only values academic qualifications, still did not accept Soya. Just then, Hae-jin walked in. It turned out that Hae-jin had returned from studying abroad and had gone incognito to become the chief supervisor of Chairman Park's company. Even Chairman Park had to give Hae-jin his due respect when they met. Now Jin-woo is in charge of an important project, but he can't even keep up with the design drawings. Hae-jin angrily threw the design materials all over the floor. Soya was so shocked to encounter such a scene on her first day of the interview, but in order to show her performance, Soya silently picked up the materials on the floor and handed them to Hae-jin. When they looked up, their eyes met. The same scene appeared in both of their minds. Hae-jin immediately said that his shoulder still hurt a lot. However, he didn't know that the girl in front of him was the Soya he had thought about day and night. Hae-jin described Soya as a bad girl. Jin Woo, who already didn't like Soya, directly declared the interview a failure. Hae-jin suddenly realized when he saw Soya's resume that the girl who just came in was actually the Soya he had been thinking about. That day, Taejun was about to tell Soya about the two of them when he learned the woman's identity. His father was so scared that he turned around and ran. Soya thought that Taejun had suddenly announced their relationship and that's why he scared Kim. At this time, Kim, who had run outside, almost cried out of fear because he had finally waited for his son to become successful. Unexpectedly, Soya appeared at this time. This means that all his hidden secrets are likely to be exposed. Then all the hard work over the years will be in vain. More importantly, because Taejun has become the prosecutor's wife, he has decided to marry Ari into their family. Butler Kim did not want Soya to appear at this time no matter what. He wanted to forcibly take Taejun back. Soya, who did not know the truth, followed him and kept apologizing to Butler Kim. Soya never imagined that after meeting Butler Kim again after 15 years, he would hate her so much. Soya, who was already sad, became even more sad. After a brief goodbye, she hurriedly left. After returning home, her father gave Taejun two difficult choices: either kill himself and go with Soya, or marry Ari and become the son-in-law of a wealthy family and turn over a new leaf. Taejun felt unbearable pain from a life he could not help but lead. Soya buried all her unhappiness deep inside and returned to help her mother with the stall. But her brother was here with two of his friends eating and drinking. When he saw his sister come back drunk, he even came over to tease Soya. Soya had no good feelings towards her brother who was so irresponsible, and they had a fight. When her brother's friends saw this, they tried to leave. Soya hurriedly stepped forward to block their way and told them to pay the bill. This meal cost Soya 2 months' salary. Her friends were afraid to provoke Soya and had to obediently pay the bill. Her brother, who didn't know how hard life was and didn't contribute to the family, felt that Soya had let him lose face. Furious, her brother followed Soya home and reached out to teach her a lesson. Soya was not someone to be trifled with, and she immediately made her brother get on the floor and keep begging for mercy. When her mother returned home and saw her son being bullied by Soya, she was heartbroken. She tried her best to protect her son and scolded Soya for treating her brother like that. Soya just wanted her brother to be a man and take responsibility for his actions. She didn't want her brother to live like this forever. Now Soya doesn't expect her brother to earn much money, but he shouldn't be so inconsiderate as to spend the family money and not even be able to pay the rent. Soya said all this, but her mother still chose to stand by her son, believing that he would definitely succeed in the future. Seeing that her mother was on her side, her brother felt extremely dissatisfied with what Soya had said. Soya returned to her room, exhausted both physically and mentally. Looking at her father's portrait, she felt extremely aggrieved. She asked her father why he was so tired. When would this life of poverty finally come to an end? Her sensible younger sister came into the room to comfort her and told her not to cry. Soya did not know that her deceased father was not her biological father. She thought that her siblings and herself had the same father but different mothers. Soya endured all the grievances and dried her tears before helping her adoptive mother close the stall. However, the dried tears once again refused to stop flowing. Her adoptive mother didn't know what to say to comfort Soya. Early the next morning, Soya was full of energy and ready to start her busy day when she was stopped by a man. The man took her directly to a luxurious yacht. It turned out that He-jin had recognized Soya and had deliberately arranged this reunion. At first, He-jin did not directly reveal his identity, but instead used the excuse of recruiting to get close to Soya and ask if she had liked anyone when she was little. Although Soya felt puzzled, she still told He-jin that she had. He-jin secretly rejoiced upon hearing this and thought that Soya must have been talking about him. Then he directly asked Soya if she had a boyfriend now. If not, what did she think of me? At this point, Soya felt cheated. He-jin was laughing proudly when Soya poured a glass of water directly in his face. Without waiting for He-jin to explain, Soya angrily wanted to leave. He-jin hurriedly chased after her, grabbed Soya's hand and tried to stop her. Soya felt annoyed and directly punched him. However, before she could take 2 steps, Soya received a call from the shipyard informing her that she had been accepted. She then realized that the man she had just kicked into the water was actually the interviewer. Soya returned in great shame and wanted to apologize. At this time, He-jin, who was preparing to go ashore, saw Soya coming and immediately pretended to be unable to swim, shouting for help. Soya was shocked and stepped forward to try to save He-jin. However, the next second, He-jin pulled her into the water. At this time, He-jin was still continuing his performance. Finally, Soya managed to use all her strength to fish He-jin out, but He-jin pretended to be dead and lay motionless on the ground. This scared Soya even more, and she immediately started first aid. Then she went straight to mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He-jin opened one eye and glanced at her, trying to trick Soya again with a kiss. Seeing no reaction, Soya had to go in for mouth-to-mouth resuscitation again. The two, who had not seen each other for 15 years, finally recognized each other and sat down together. This time, the reason He-jin came forward was that Soya had successfully been accepted into the shipyard and encouraged Soya to go forth and realize her dreams. But in the end, He-jin still really wanted to know who Soya's first love was when she was little. Soya took a big spoon and hit He-jin on the head, telling him to forget about it. In fact, Soya's life from now on would be tightly bound to He-jin's, because the shipyard where she worked was quite far away from her foster parents. Soya and Tae-jun went to rent a house. This house is the house of Ji-min's uncle, whom Soya has not seen for 15 years. Ji-min has also become a prosecutor through hard work. He is also very happy to see that Soya is now a tall and graceful young lady. When he saw Soya again, he just opened his mouth and waived all the rent, so that she could live in peace of mind. At this time, Choi Hwa, who admires Ji-min, also happened to come here. Seeing Ji-min chatting and laughing with a young girl, she instantly felt jealous. Ji-min had no choice but to explain that this was the Soya who had grown up. Choi Hwa then laughed awkwardly. Soya had finally arrived at the company of her dreams and started work. On the other side of the street, Choi Hwa accidentally told her sister about Soya's appearance and arrival at the company. Madam was shocked. Butler Jean was scared. Madam had searched for Soya for 15 years and finally got some news. She immediately hurried to the company, holding back her fear and excitement. When she arrived at the company, she asked directly where Soya was. An employee told her that Soya had gone to the bathroom. Without stopping, the lady followed the smell and hurried to the bathroom. At a glance, the lady saw the scar on the back of Soya's memory. However, she could not immediately confirm that Soya was her dead daughter. In order to confirm further, the lady came to the address where Soya's adoptive mother lived. Park Jin, the butler, in order to prevent the lady from knowing Soya's true identity, went to visit her under the guise of being a close friend of Soya's foster mother. Meanwhile, Chairman Park learned from Ari that Madam had just come to the company to look for Soya. He was very worried that Madam would uncover the ugly secret he had done back then. Chairman Park immediately called Butler Kim and learned that Madam was on her way to meet Soya's mother. He directly instructed Butler Kim to deal with this matter thoroughly this time and let Madam give up. Even if Chairman Park didn't say anything, Butler Kim knew what to do. He was even more afraid than Chairman Park that Madam would find out Soya's real identity. After Madam met her foster mother, she hurriedly took the little yellow dress to her and asked her about it. Butler Kim kept hinting on the side that this dress was once picked up. The foster mother glanced at the dress and casually said she didn't remember. When Madam took out a photo of Soya when she was little to show her, the foster mother immediately recognized the little girl in the photo as Soya, but she kept all the secrets in her heart and deceived the lady. Soya is her own daughter. Butler Jean urged the lady to leave, but at this time, The adoptive mother was in deep doubt, because she always thought that Soya was her husband's illegitimate daughter, but now she has become the daughter of the Chable's wife. She didn't know what was going on, so she didn't tell the lady the truth just now. Chairman Park deliberately took out Soya's resume in order to make the lady completely believe that her daughter had died. Madam saw from Soya's blood type that she could not have given birth to a daughter with this blood type, then her child may really have died 26 years ago. In the end, Madam sadly burned all of her daughter's belongings. She decided to let go of her obsession and treat her current two children, Ari and Jinwoo, well. On the other hand, after learning that Soya was the daughter of a Chable, the adoptive mother and her late husband felt the same guilt towards Soya. Soya, who should have been well off, has really sacrificed too much for this poor family over the past few decades, and yet she has never had any regrets. Soya saw her adoptive mother crying, and, not knowing why, thought that her adoptive mother was missing her deceased father again, and, with a heart full of compassion, she hugged her adoptive mother to comfort her. Butler Kim felt relieved that the matter between Soya and Madam had been completely resolved. He found Soya and warned her not to see Taejun again and to sever all contact. How could Soya give up on the relationship that had lasted for over 10 years? However, what she got in return was a slap from Butler Kim. Soya felt that there was nothing wrong with loving someone. Butler Kim didn't waste any more time arguing with Soya and warned her again that she would be responsible for the consequences if she met Taejun again. However, when Butler Kim returned home, he took the initiative to tell Taejun about the incident of slapping Soya. Breaking up with Soya and marrying Ari was the best outcome for everyone, but Taejun angrily said that he would not give up on his love for Soya. He immediately found Soya and apologized for his father's actions. Soya did not want Taejun to have too much psychological burden and affect his career. She told Taejun that she would definitely continue to work hard to get closer to her brother and gain his recognition. Even if she got beaten, she would hold on to her brother and not let go. Butler Kim, who learned that Soya had met with his son, once again found Soya. Soya was so scared that she closed her eyes and braced herself for the beating. But the next second, Butler Kim knelt directly in front of Soya and begged her to let go of Taejun. Taejun has worked hard until now, and finally sees the light at the end of the tunnel. He hopes that if Soya really loves Taejun, she shouldn't continue to be entangled. You don't say. Butler Kim's method really worked. Soya felt that being together would drag Taejun down, and finally she forgot the promise she made last night and sent Taejun a text message breaking up with him. The poor girl was once again crying sadly. With red eyes, Soya returned to the company and was waiting for the elevator. Haejin saw Soya with tears in the corners of her eyes and hurriedly asked who had bullied her. Feeling distressed, just then, Taejun, who couldn't get in touch with Soya, arrived. He took Soya's hand directly, ignoring Haejin, and forcibly wanted to take her away. If Soya hadn't explained in time, the two men would have probably fought. Haejin and Taejun were meeting for the first time after 15 years. This time, Taejun asked Soya not to give up on their relationship because of the influence of her father. Soya was also in pain and didn't want it to end like this. Fortunately, Taejun gave Soya firm confidence at this time. Haejin, who knew that Soya was actually in a relationship with Taejun, was very angry. He hates the fact that Taejun continues to have a close relationship with Chairman Park's family, since their opinions are not the same. Haejin doesn't want to have a deeper friendship with Taejun. What's more, Taejun actually deceived him all these years by saying that he had no contact with Soya. Now they are about to get married. He has violated the rule of pursuing Soya that he promised when they were young. But now that it's come to this, Haejin cannot go and ruin Soya's happiness. When he left, he just forced a smile and told Taejun to treat Soya well. But how could Haejin just let go of his feelings for Soya so easily? She was the woman he loved most in this life and also his only first love. During an important work meeting, Haejin's eyes were full of the figure of Soya, who was busy in the distance. He even came out directly after the meeting ended, leaving Park President and the others in a hurry to chase after Soya to the seaside to feel the sea breeze. Haejin did not hide his feelings for Soya, and he did not understand why he was inferior to Taejun, and questioned Soya why she chose Taejun, knowing that he had liked her since childhood. But what good would it do to get an answer? Haejin just felt so unwilling, and in the end, he could only force a smile again and wish Soya happiness with Taejun. Haejin, who is sad, buries his pain deep in his heart. He gets drunk and regrets leaving Soya when he went abroad to study. Haejin's grandfather, who does not know why Haejin is sad, changes his plan to take revenge on Chairman Park. He tells Haejin to marry Ari and become a son-in-law after Chairman Park dies. This way he can easily take back everything he has lost. Haejin shook his head, feeling that his grandfather was naive. Ari, on the other hand, was also being persuaded by her mother to marry Taejun. Unexpectedly, Ari only had Haejin in her eyes. She told her mother that Taejun was only like the gardener in her eyes. How could she let herself marry a servant? But on the other side, Butler Kim was actively trying to make Ari his daughter-in-law and turn the tables on the master. He found Soya's adoptive mother and directly gave her a large sum of money to ask her to stop dating Taejun. Although the foster mother was tempted by the money and took it, she decided not to do what the dog-eyed butler told her to do. Instead, she told Soya about it and encouraged her to boldly love Taejun if she really liked him. The foster mother was even more worried that the simple Soya would be cheated on. So she specially went to find Taejun and got the confirmation that Taejun was sincere about Soya. She warned Taejun not to hurt Soya because of his father, who knew that Ari invited Soya to her home that night to regain the feelings they had 15 years ago. And Butler Kim and Taejun were also. Now that Taejun has become a prosecutor, Butler Kim can now eat at the table with Chairman Park. Soya's arrival made Butler Kim both scared and angry. Ari knew that Butler Kim had always wanted his son to marry her, so she deliberately said at the dinner table that Soya and Taejun were a perfect match. This gave Taejun a good opportunity to announce his relationship with Soya publicly. Taejun ignored his father's attempts to stop him and told Chairman and Mrs. Park that he had been in love with Soya for more than 10 years and was ready to get married. This news directly shattered the dreams of Butler Kim of becoming the master of the house. He had been stifled for a lifetime and finally had something to look forward to. Angrily, Butler Kim directly smashed all the cutlery in front of him onto the floor. He was extremely dissatisfied with his son's current actions, and then left without saying a word. Taejun ignored his father's extreme behavior and apologized to Chairman Park, and begged Chairman Park and his wife to help him persuade his father to agree to the marriage. And then Soya accidentally discovered something that made Taejun feel desperate about his father, because Soya saw the man in black who imprisoned their family 15 years ago among the criminals published in the newspaper. And the person behind the black-clad gangster was none other than Taejun's father. Butler Kim discovered that Soya was still getting along with his son and became extremely angry. Butler Kim wanted to teach Soya a lesson. Just then, a luxury car pulled up. Haejin saw his beloved woman being bullied and punched Butler Kim directly to the ground. Soya saw this and hurriedly pulled Haejin back, who was about to do it again, and then told him that the man on the ground was Taejun's father. Haejin then looked shocked and did not hit the butler again. Meanwhile, Taejun was interrogating the man who sold Soya 15 years ago. Seeing that the man was not willing to cooperate, Taejun did not show mercy to the murderer who bullied his girlfriend. The man was beaten and had no choice but to admit the person behind the incident. Taejun could not believe it when he heard it was his father. He did not understand why his father would treat Soya, who was only 13 at the time, that way. When he walked out of the police station in a daze, Haejin found him. Haejin had previously said to Taejun to treat Soya well and not let her cry. Now it's not just tears, but a beating. Haejin directly told Taejun to immediately give up his relationship with Soya. Taejun, who had originally felt desperate about his father, at this time once again heard that his father had beaten Soya. The image of his father completely collapsed in Taejun's heart. Sad and angry, Taejun returned home and asked his father why he had done that. Butler Kim did not feel that he had done anything wrong, saying that everything was for Taejun's future. In the end, he even threatened Taejun to either break up with Soya or take himself to jail. However, Taejun directly chose to run away from home and sever the father-son relationship. He then found Soya and hoped that she would also run away from home and marry him to live together. Although Soya really wanted to marry Taejun, her adoptive family needed her at the moment. She directly rejected Taejun's proposal and refused to leave. Taejun did not tell his father that he was the one who tried to sell Soya 13 years ago. He was afraid that his father would hurt Soya again. Unexpectedly, his younger sister, who was eavesdropping, learned from their conversation that her sister had been bullied by Taejun's father, so she immediately told her mother about it. Her adoptive mother suppressed her anger and decided to seek justice for Soya. The next day, she went to find Butler Kim alone. As soon as she met him, the adoptive mother started fighting directly. After venting her anger, she warned the butler that if he dared to bully Soya again, he would suffer the consequences. After this incident, the adoptive mother knew that Soya must have buried her pain inside. For the first time, the adoptive mother made a lunchbox for Soya to bring to her. Over the years, if it weren't for Soya supporting the family, it would have been difficult for the adoptive mother to raise her 3 children on her own. She was unable to send Soya to university, and at this time, the adoptive mother also felt a tremendous amount of guilt towards her. And now her adoptive mother has learned that Soya is actually the lost child of the chaebol's wife. The child who should have been enjoying life is actually living a miserable life by her side. The adoptive mother blamed herself for everything. The next day, Soya anxiously came to the police station. It turned out that her younger sister China, who had stolen the chaebol's son's money last night, had been arrested at the police station. Soya couldn't believe that her younger sister would commit theft. The police told her that all the physical evidence was here, so how could there be a mistake? At this time, the chaebol's son also came to the police station to testify against China. Soya recognized the man in front of her at a glance. Jinwoo also recognized Soya. Jinwoo, who already hated Soya, firmly disagreed with the idea of an easy settlement. No matter how Soya begged, it was useless. Soya had no choice but to call Taejun for help, but Taejun was currently handling an important case, and before Soya could explain the situation, Taejun turned off his phone in a few words. Unexpectedly, while Soya was rushing to the scene, Haejin called and learned that the person he loved needed help. Haejin put down what he was doing and rushed over at the first opportunity. Without hesitation, promising Soya that he would help her save her sister. Until the evening, China came out safely from the police station. Soya, who was waiting outside, of course would not let her wayward sister go so easily. Soya angrily went up to catch her sister and teach her a good lesson. China had to use He-jin to block her sister from catching her. She begged He-jin to help her stop her. He-jin saw that there was no way out of the situation in front of him and had to help. But Soya, who was being held by He-jin, refused to give up and tried to break free. He-jin had no choice but to hug Soya with both hands again, but unexpectedly touched the wrong place. Soya used her head to knock He-jin to the ground and broke free. Poor He-jin didn't know how long it would be before he went to wash his hands. When she returned home, China was still scolded by her mother. Her mother was in pain because the children did not have a father. She had worked hard to raise the children, although she did not want them to all achieve something, but they can't do anything illegal. The mother felt a pang of sadness and sat on the ground crying bitterly. On the other side, Tae-jun, who had ignored Soya's busy schedule to work on a big case, finally got a chance to take revenge. All these years, he and his father, Chairman Park, had suffered humiliation and pain at home. He decided to make Chairman Park pay the price he deserved. Since becoming a prosecutor, Tae-jun had been secretly gathering evidence of Chairman Park's crimes with Jimin. This time, they finally found evidence of Chairman Park's illegal transactions, so he directly took the arrest warrant and arrested Chairman Park. Chairman Park did not feel the least bit flustered by what Tae-jun had done, but threw him a photo. This photo was exactly the scene photo taken by the police when Soo-jun died 15 years ago. Just as Tae-jun was puzzled, Chairman Park stood up and told him that the real murderer of Soo-jun 15 years ago was his father. It turned out that the butler, Kim, had accidentally run over Soya's adoptive father in a car accident. Then, in order to find conclusive evidence, Chairman Park's secretary saw the butler, Kim, get into the car and found his blood and fingerprints on the car. At this time, Tae-jun also remembered the scene when his father came home injured in a daze one night. With all the evidence, Tae-jun had to believe that his father had killed Soo-jun. He staggered out of Chairman Park's office, and then remembered why his father had been so adamantly against him being with Soya before. Tae-jun returned home and questioned his father as to why he had killed Soo-jun, and butler Kim went so far as to cover up the truth by describing Soo-jun as a man without a single redeeming quality. Tae-jun found it hard to accept this reality. He felt so much pain. He didn't know how to face Soya. How can he fulfill his promise to spend the rest of his life with Soya? The next day, Tae-jun destroyed all of Chairman Park's criminal information in order to protect his father. This made Jimin, who had always wanted to deal with Chairman Park, furious. After all these years, it was all for nothing. Tae-jun did not give an explanation, but instead handed in his resignation letter with a guilty heart, apologizing to Jimin. He thought that because of his father, he could no longer take any revenge against Chairman Park. He was prepared to bow his head and admit defeat, and take his father away from the evil man that was Chairman Park. But Tae-jun was really naive. How could the vicious Chairman Park let go of someone who was a threat to him so easily? He told Tae-jun that there was no choice. He had to serve his master faithfully and slowly pay back the price for his betrayal. Tae-jun, who had no choice, happened to run into Soya when he came out. He didn't know what kind of mood he was going to face Soya in. At this time, Soya was called to Jinwoo's office for tea. He said some things to Soya that made Tae-jun unhappy, but after Soya left, Jinwoo collected the cup that Soya had used. It turned out that Jinwoo had always hated his current stepmother. He accidentally saw his stepmother chatting with Soya about scars. His stepmother also talked about her experience of losing a child. At first, she thought Soya was her daughter, but because of the blood type, she dismissed that thought, and all of their conversations were heard by Jinwoo. He took the cup Soya used and the stepmother's hair to do a paternity test. Looking at the words paternity established, Jinwoo couldn't believe it. Soya really is the stepmother's long-lost biological daughter. Meanwhile, Tae-jun asked Soya out to prepare for his final and difficult decision. Soya looked at her emaciated boyfriend in front of her and felt heartbroken. She didn't know what had happened to her boyfriend. Without hesitation, Tae-jun directly proposed to break up. Soya, who didn't know the truth, didn't blame her boyfriend for his choice. Instead, she encouraged her boyfriend to cheer up and face the future with a happy heart. Soya was Tae-jun's girlfriend whom he had loved for more than 10 years. He resented what his father had done, ruining his happiness. He spent his days lying in bed, suffering in pain, isolated from the outside world and ignoring his father. Butler Kim's ancestors had been destined to be servants for more than 10 generations. He had always hoped that Tae-jun's generation would end the damned servants' fate, but at this time, Butler Kim looked at the great pain he had caused his son and finally relented. The only way for his son to be happy was to take Soya and leave this place far away. Otherwise, if he continued to stay here, he would only become Chairman Park's servant like himself. Tae-jun then made up his mind, and without Soya's knowledge, he wanted to take her with him and run away. Chairman Park Jimin is still investigating. He is furious, and then he comes directly to Tae-jun to stop Jimin's behavior. Unexpectedly, Chairman Park just happened to find that Tae-jun has packed his bags and fled. Butler Kim had to beg Chairman Park to let Tae-jun go, but Chairman Park said that as long as he needs Tae-jun, he will be by his side until the end. Butler Kim saw that he was not convinced and threatened Chairman Park that he would tell the whole truth. President Park was not intimidated by Butler Kim and threatened to send Tae-jun to hell if he dared to do so. In a fit of rage, Butler Kim wanted to kill the culprit in front of him, so that Tae-jun could truly be set free. However, President Park's subordinate, who had his hand outside, heard the noise and rushed in time. The result was predictable. Butler Kim was brutally beaten by President Park. He immediately sent someone to the airport to make sure Tae-jun was brought back. At this time, Soya, who was inexplicably taken to the airport by Tae-jun to leave the country, was unhappy. She had her family here, and she didn't want to leave like this. Tae-jun told Soya that if they didn't leave now, they might never be together. At this time, Tae-jun received a call from Chairman Park on his father's phone. At this time, Soya received the photo and saw it was a license plate number, which made her feel very puzzled. Tae-jun was terrified and took Soya's phone away from her and dropped it. Because the photo was the license plate number of the car driven by Butler Kim that hit and killed Soya's adoptive father. Soya couldn't understand Tae-jun's behavior and finally turned around and left alone. When Tae-jun chased after her, he happened to meet the people who came to arrest him. In the end, he was unable to escape and was brought before Chairman Park. Tae-jun, for the safety of his father and to prevent Soya from knowing that her father was a murderer, had no choice but to bear the humiliation and kneel on the ground to apologize to Chairman Park, and said that he would do everything according to Chairman Park's instructions in the future. His father saw his son return and stood in front of him, questioning why he had returned. Tae-jun told his father that now that he could not get rid of Chairman Park's control, he would find a way to surpass him. Tae-jun, whose mental state had changed, found Soya again. He did not express his determination to break up as gently as before. Instead, he directly told Soya, "You really don't deserve to be my future wife." Tae-jun understands that if he wants to overthrow Chairman Park, he must forget Soya and marry Ari. But for poor Soya, this is a huge blow. After 15 years of feelings, she actually doesn't deserve him. On the other side, Madam's conversation with the doctor at the hospital inadvertently gives her hope that her daughter is still alive. It turns out that the doctor told Madam that her blood is special and she can give birth to a child with a different blood type. This shocked Madam instantly. She hurriedly found Soya's adoptive mother again, but at this time, the foster mother knew that she could not live without Soya in this family, and firmly said that Soya was her biological daughter. The foster mother had always wondered how her husband could have a child with the wife, so she asked the wife who the father of her lost child was. The wife told the foster mother that the father of the child was an expert in oil research. With this answer, the foster mother let go of her heart, and the wife, who had not gotten the truth, left in pain, but she always firmly believed that her lost daughter must still be alive. After the lady left, the adoptive mother looked at the photo of her dead husband. She couldn't understand why her husband loved a child who wasn't his biological child so much. Then the lady deliberately invited Soya to her home for tea. When Soya was about to leave, she quickly plucked a hair from her head. The lady was going to do a paternity test on Soya to completely uncover her suspicions in her heart. But the lady's actions were seen by Jin-woo. Jin-woo already knew that Soya was the biological daughter of the stepmother. He has always believed that the stepmother married into this family with evil intentions, and that she must be trying to find her biological daughter to take over all the family's wealth. Jin-woo followed the stepmother to the identification center, where she handed the items over to the identification staff. She did not notice Jin-woo following her and left with a heavy heart. It seems that Jin-woo will definitely try to interfere with the results of this identification. The adoptive mother, who knows the truth about Soya's identity, is also burdened with a heavy heart. She feels guilty for making a chaebol heiress suffer so much at her side. Soya doesn't know her foster mother's thoughts, but she understands and comforts her. Unexpectedly, their conversation is overheard by their son. Suk-jin finally realizes that Soya and he were not born of the same mother. That day, her foster mother was 100% certain of Soya's true identity. She had accidentally seen a family photo in Jimin's room. The child in the man's arms was the Soya her husband had brought back that year. Soon after Jimin returned, after asking, the adoptive mother understood that the man in the photo holding the baby with the woman was Soya's father. This made the adoptive mother feel incredible. That Jimin, who had been helping Soya, was actually related to Soya by blood. And the next thing that happened made the adoptive mother finally tell Soya the whole truth. That day, Soya scolded her younger brother as usual for being lazy and never thinking about the family. But this time, Suk-jin no longer chose to endure and directly rebelled. He slapped Soya in the face and pointed at her nose and said, "Who do you think you are? You're not even my real sister." These words directly and fiercely pierced Soya's heart. She had known about their relationship 15 years ago, but she still treated her brother and sister as the people closest to her, giving of herself without complaint or regret. Fortunately, every time Soya was sad, Hae-jin would appear on the scene by some strange coincidence, and comforts her by letting her lean on his shoulder. If you want to cry, just cry out loud. At this moment, Soya's adoptive mother also feels unbearable pain. Soya has worked hard for the family for so many years, and never expected that her son would say such heartless things to hurt her. She cries and asks her dead husband if she was too selfish to hurt Soya. Now she has to let go of Soya and give her the happiness she deserves. After she had come to terms with it, her adoptive mother decided not to stand in the way of Soya's reunion with her mother, and told Soya to leave the family home once and for all and tell the truth. She hoped that Soya would go and meet her mother and live a rich life, and not continue to toil for this family with whom she had no blood ties. This sudden change was hard for Soya to accept. She went to the place where her adoptive father was buried and thought about how he had protected and cared for her throughout her life. She really couldn't accept that her beloved father was not her biological father. Soya went to her mother's house, but she only took a distant look at her biological mother and left, because she couldn't forget a sentence her adoptive father once said to her: "No matter what happens, your current family will always be your family." In the end, Soya made her own decision and went home to tell her adoptive mother that she could not leave this family. She was very grateful to her biological parents, but she was even more grateful to her adoptive parents who raised her. Sukjin was kicked out by his mother and sneaked back to find food, which happened to be seen by Soya. Soya specially made a big table of food for her brother to eat. She did not blame her brother for hitting her before. Instead, she told her brother not to quit his job if he felt tired. Over the years, Soya has not only had a brother-sister relationship with her brother and sister, but also worked hard to raise them like a mother. Soya really can't let go of their feelings. At this time, her brother also felt a sense of immense guilt. Soya went to Jimin's room and picked up the family photo of herself and her biological parents. She had no intention of telling Jimin the truth. Instead, she asked Jimin about her biological father, who had already died. From Jimin's words, Soya not only learned that her biological father loved his daughter very much, but also that her father had been killed by someone else. Before leaving, Soya kindly told Jimin to take care of her health. Although they could not be reunited, Soya was still very happy at this moment. Now she not only has two dads who love her, but also a loving uncle by her side. She is already very content. Meanwhile, the paternity test report done by Mrs. Jang and Soya is also out, but the result shows that they are not related. It seems that Jinwoo has indeed tampered with the test result. Disappointed, Mrs. Jang painfully goes to the beach to apologize to her late husband. She is going to give up on finding her daughter completely, but when she is leaving, she happens to bump into Soya, who has also come to the beach. The lady told Soya that her daughter disappeared and died here, but she didn't know that her long-cherished biological daughter was right by her side. Soya comforted the lady, saying that her daughter must be alive somewhere else. Don't be too sad. She must be living well and must also miss her mother. She doesn't want to see her mother too sad either. Soya looked at her biological mother, who had left sadly, and could only say sorry. Taejun chose to stand by Chairman Park. In order to stop Jimin from continuing to investigate Chairman Park, Taejun plotted behind his back and framed him, causing Jimin to be forced to suspend his duties. Soya learned about this and found Taejun to clear Jimin's name. However, their meeting was secretly witnessed by Ari. Taejun deliberately raised his hand and slapped Soya hard to get Ari's approval, telling her to mind her own business. Soya immediately shed tears of pain. She never imagined that her once beloved brother could become so horrible. Now Taejun is Soya's direct supervisor at work. He directly fired Soya from the company. Working at the shipyard was Soya's lifelong dream. Her adoptive mother had always felt guilty towards Soya. Now she saw Soya being abandoned by Taejun, and ruthlessly shattered Soya's dreams. The adoptive mother really couldn't bear to let Soya continue to live in such pain. She went directly to the wife's house and decided to reveal Soya's true identity. However, no matter how the foster mother explained, Soya was adopted by her husband. Soya's appearance as a child was exactly the same as the photo of her daughter in the wife's hands. However, because the wife had previously believed the paternity report that did not establish Soya as her daughter, she told the foster mother that she had already undergone a paternity test and directly denied the fact that Soya was her biological daughter. Afterwards, the foster mother was very confused as to why the results of the tests were inconsistent. But at this time, Butler Jean was even more puzzled. Although he didn't want Soya's identity to be known to Madam, but he knew clearly that Soya was Madam's biological daughter. Kind people will always be silently protected. Although Soya could not go to the shipyard to pursue her dreams, Hae-jin brought Soya to his grandfather's shipyard to continue pursuing her dreams. At this time, the two of them were working on a major problem. This technology is coveted by all shipyards, so Jinwoo approached Soya's brother and offered an attractive price. If Soya and Hae-jin cracked the technology, they could steal it for themselves. Sok-jin, who was lazy in the face of money, immediately agreed. With Hae-jin by her side, Soya didn't notice that she was smiling more and more. After some hard work, the two of them achieved perfect success in this test. Soya excitedly hugged Hae-jin to celebrate the results of their research. That night, Soya celebrated with Hae-jin's grandfather, and her brother was also there. Soya didn't know that her brother had already been bribed by Jinwoo. Then her brother told Jinwoo about Soya's success. Jinwoo threatened to pay a lot of money if he stole Soya's model and drawings. Unexpectedly, Taejun also heard the news behind her back and decided to get the technology too. While Soya and the others were celebrating their success, Seokjin secretly went to Haejin's yacht where he stored his data. As soon as he entered the yacht, Haejin's phone went off. It turned out that there were hidden surveillance devices installed in the yacht. Seokjin quickly took all the drawings and models on the table. Soya and Haejin saw this whole scene. Without thinking twice, they immediately went to the yacht. However, on the way there, Haejin discovered through surveillance that a group of masked men had broken into the yacht and stolen the other set of drawings and models. These were all technical problem data that Soya had overcome great difficulties to crack. Soya rushed to the yacht and fearlessly stood directly in front of the masked men. It was clear that the two sides had directly begun a battle. Although there were only two people on Soya's side, she had never been afraid of anyone since she was young. From a distance, Taejun sat in the car and watched silently, seeing that his side could not even defeat a woman, while listening to the secretary of Chairman Park directly starting the car. Without regard to Taejun on the side, Soya and Haejin who were running towards this side crashed into each other, although Taejun interfered in time, causing the car to change its direction slightly. But Haejin was hit hard by the car and flew out to save Soya. Upon seeing this, the other masked men took all the documents and models that had fallen to the ground and left. Soya could not care less and hurriedly came to the side of the unconscious Haejin to check on his condition. At this time, a scene in front of her reminded Soya of the image of her adoptive father being hit by a car to save her 15 years ago. Soya was afraid that such a tragedy would happen again. At this time, she was prepared to immediately call the police and rescue Haejin. Fortunately, at this time, the unconscious Haejin woke up, which made Soya relieved. On the other side, Seokjin, who had stolen the data, asked Jinwoo for the agreed payment, but the data brought by Seokjin was incomplete after comparison, and Jinwoo not only didn't pay him, but also scolded him and drove him away. Subsequently, the data that Taejun had sent someone to steal was also brought here for confirmation, and this data was much more complete than Jinwoo's. Taejun stole the limelight and was scolded by his father, which made Jinwoo feel very resentful. Taejun's revenge was to humiliate Jinwoo for the humiliation he had suffered back then. Haejin forced himself to go home with Soya despite his discomfort and found Seokjin. Facing Soya's questioning, Seokjin thought there was no evidence and did not admit to stealing just now. When Haejin took out the surveillance video, Seokjin immediately knelt down and admitted his mistake and asked for forgiveness. Then he told him about being tricked by Jinwoo into stealing the information. Soya wanted her brother to go to the police and report Jinwoo. Haejin immediately stopped her. Jinwoo would definitely not admit to it, and Seokjin would also be implicated as a result. Just as Soya was at a loss as to what to do, Haejin's words made her feel relieved. Even if they had the model and the data, without Soya's hands-on work, it would never be successful. On the other side, after further confirmation, Chairman Park also got the same result. Although they had the drawings and the model, without Soya, it would be impossible to succeed. Hearing this news, Jinwoo happily laughed, because Taejun brought back the same pile of useless papers as he did. Chairman Park instructed them to find a way to get Soya on their side. Taejun directly came up with a ruthless method, which was to have Haejin's factory shut down. The next day, Haejin's grandfather's factory received a message from the bank demanding payment. Haejin's grandfather originally wanted to sell the product developed by Soya and pay back the money. After learning that the data had been stolen, Haejin's grandfather was devastated. But the technology was in Soya's hands. Haejin was in a hurry to make another one, so he asked his grandfather to quickly prepare the raw materials. Unexpectedly, his grandfather got some bad news over the phone. At this point, they could no longer buy any materials. They knew without a doubt that this was all Chairman Park's doing. Soya went to Chairman Park alone to ask for help for Haejin, but Chairman Park only made one request, that Soya work at his shipyard. Chairman Park had always been a respectable person in Soya's heart. At this point, she truly saw through Chairman Park's true colors and did not agree. But Chairman Park was determined to get what he wanted because he knew that Soya cared about Haejin. He ordered Taejun to step up the attacks on Haejin's company. The next day, Haejin's grandfather's shipyard was foreclosed by the court because he could not repay the loan. Everything in the factory was sealed. This place not only contains Soya's dream, but also Haejin's. Seeing their dreams sealed in front of them, the two of them felt heartbroken. Soya could see in her eyes and empathize with the pain Haejin was feeling at this moment. She resolutely turned around and went to Chairman Park, directly agreeing to his previous request. However, Soya only made one request, which was to restore Haejin's family's shipyard to its original state. After weighing the pros and cons, Chairman Park could only accept Soya's request, but Soya's actions made Haejin feel extremely indignant. Haejin would rather starve to death than bow to Chairman Park and beg for mercy. He also didn't want his beloved woman to compromise and make concessions for him. But Soya felt that temporary forbearance was only for the better realization of dreams in the future. If there was no factory to realize the dream now, then the dream would really just be a dream that never came true. Soya, who couldn't sleep until late at night, thought that she might have really hurt Haejin. She wanted to call and comfort the other person. Unexpectedly, Haejin redirected Soya's call directly to voicemail. Seeing that there was no answer, Soya boldly spoke her mind. She was very grateful to Heijin for always caring about her and healing her wounds. It was precisely because of this that she had unknowingly developed feelings for her brother. After saying all this, Soya couldn't believe she had said such things, and hurriedly deleted what she had just said. The next day, Heijin's grandfather secretly met with a mysterious person, and took out a suitcase full of cash to make the man reveal a secret that had been hidden for more than 20 years. It turned out that this man had once been an underling of Chairman Park. Back then, in order to obtain secret information from Heijin's parents, who were petroleum experts, he relentlessly pursued them. As a result, Heijin's parents accidentally had a car accident. Chairman Park saw that the information he wanted was not found in the car, so he directly set the car on fire with the person inside. Subsequently, Chairman Park found Heijin's father's colleague Soya and obtained the information. After that, he directly killed his good friend. Grandpa finally knew the reason why his son and daughter-in-law died tragically. However, they did not know what information Chairman Park was looking for and went to the extent of killing people. Furious, Grandpa went to find Chairman Park that night to vent his hatred. Chairman Park was also very surprised that Grandpa had found out the truth. But more than 20 years have passed, and the law no longer threatens him. But Grandpa threatened to find evidence and tell the truth to the media. If the law can't stop him, then he will be disgraced. This move did make Chairman Park hesitate. After returning to his office, Chairman Park instructed his secretary to make sure that Grandpa Heijin kept his mouth shut forever, and find out who leaked the truth. Meanwhile, Soya took the initiative to ask Heijin out, who was still angry. However, how could Heijin stay angry with Soya? The person he loved most was Soya. In no time, he was laughing heartily, but Heijin hoped that Soya would continue to help him achieve his dreams. While the two were flirting, Grandpa was in danger. Grandpa discovered that the factory had been vandalized, so he searched for suspicious people with a flashlight. Unexpectedly, he had an electric shock and collapsed. Then a man in black appeared on the phone and said that the job was done. Soon after, Heijin and Soya returned and found that Grandpa was not in the office. At this time, Grandpa was lying motionless on the ground, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. Heijin urgently took Grandpa to the hospital for rescue, but it was too late. The doctor told Heijin that Grandpa's internal organs had extensive necrosis and he might not survive the night. Grandpa was the only relative that Heijin had known since childhood. This made Heijin feel incredibly devastated. On the other side, Chairman Park, who learned that Grandpa was not dead, angrily blamed the secretary for not doing a good job. Now that it has come to this, Chairman Park must not let Grandpa live. At this time, Grandpa, holding on for dear life, gives Heijin his last words before he dies. He knows that it was Chairman Park behind all of this. Grandpa is afraid that if he is gone, Heijin will also suffer at the hands of Chairman Park. He does not tell the truth. He just hopes that Heijin will not oppose Chairman Park and go on to enjoy the rest of her life happily and freely. Grandpa also hopes that Soya will take good care of Heijin in the future. However, Chairman Park hurried over, pretending to be concerned, and offered his condolences. Grandpa, who could have held on a little longer, became emotional at the sight of this man. Between his reluctance and his reluctance, he left this world forever. Heijin was devastated and couldn't accept the news of Grandpa's unexpected death. But the facts were right in front of him, and he could only accept them with pain. At the funeral, when Grandpa's former partner came to pay his condolences, he promised Heijin something important. If Gang can develop a new drilling machine for oil tankers, then all future orders from around the world will go to Heijin. And this news was also overheard by Taejun, who came to the funeral. Taejun quickly told Chairman Park this blockbuster news. Chairman Park was infuriated. If Heijin gets his way, his oil development project may fail. Taejun gives advice to root out Heijin so that he has no room to fight back. Early the next morning, several cars arrived at Heijin's shipyard. Taejun brought a building transfer certificate to take over all the factory buildings. Soya naively told Taejun to stop her, as she had just made a deal with Chairman Park. Taejun told Soya to go and reason with Chairman Park, since the factory was taken over by himself. It had nothing to do with Chairman Park. At this time, Heijin also came over and glanced at Taejun's transfer certificate, which had already taken effect. Without saying a word, he angrily threw it in Taejun's face. This shipyard was founded with great difficulty by my grandfather before he died. Heijin wanted to do everything he could to save it. Unexpectedly, he discovered that not only had all the money in the account been invested in the research institute, but the shipyard had also owed a huge loan during my grandfather's lifetime. Now not only is the shipyard in danger of being closed down, Heijin is also penniless and homeless. Late at night, Soya finds Heijin, who was drunk, at the roadside night market. Soya looks at Heijin, who was smiling with a forced face, and her heart aches. Whenever she was sad in the past, Heijin would always be there to protect her. Soya decides that this time, it is her turn to protect Heijin. In order to help Heijin pull himself together, Soya says that she will return to him soon. She researches new technology, so that those who bully them will know that they are not to be trifled with. Soya brings Heijin, who has nowhere else to go, to Jimin's place. The next day, Heijin, who sleeps until noon, arrives at Jimin's office. Hae-jin doesn't want to continue living in this sad place and doesn't want to burden Soya. Before leaving, he said that Soya was an adopted child. Jimin was shocked when he heard this. Then he happened to bump into his adoptive mother and awkwardly asked about Soya. It was a relief not to ask, because as soon as he did, his adoptive mother let out all the words that had been bottled up inside her. Soya was his niece, who had been missing for more than 20 years. Jimin was so overwhelmed with emotion that he couldn't believe it. He burst into tears and hurried to the place where Soya was. He suddenly remembered that it was strange that Soya had been so concerned about him recently, and seeing the letter his brother wrote, Soya was crying like a child. Jimin felt very self-blame. For all these years, his niece has been by his side, but he never recognized her. After seeing the scar behind Soya's back and the yellow dress that Soya's adoptive mother had once worn, Jimin was 100% sure that Soya was his brother's biological daughter. The two met and embraced tightly. After returning home, Soya spoke out her doubts. She told her uncle that she was not sure of her true identity, because the lady had done a paternity test with her and the results showed that there was no blood relationship. Jimin still firmly believed that Soya was his niece. He directly suspected that the paternity test results might be wrong. He said that he would investigate the matter later. At this time, Jimin was extremely happy. He thought that he had no relatives in the world. Now the appearance of Soya has once again made his cold heart feel the warmth of family love. Jimin quickly found some hair from his ex-sister-in-law and asked her to come over. He decided to personally do a paternity test on Soya. Jimin's actions caused his wife's previously calm heart to ripple again. She doubted whether she had really got Soya's identity wrong. Meanwhile, Soya was extremely worried about Hae-jin, who had disappeared without a trace. Fortunately, through her efforts, she finally found him in a restaurant. Soya felt very distressed at the sight of Hae-jin's self-abandonment. She encouraged Hae-jin to pick himself up and pursue his dreams, but Hae-jin felt that he was now like a beggar and had no qualifications to pursue his dreams. In order to give Hae-jin hope, Soya had to tell him the truth about her background. They were both descendants of shipbuilders, and they were going to fulfill the dreams their fathers had left unfinished. Jimin not only told Hae-jin that Soya might be his brother's daughter, but also told him the reason why his grandfather and parents might have really died. And the murderer behind all this was none other than the evil Chairman Park. Hae-jin painfully came to his grandfather's bedside. His heart, which had been silent, once again ignited with fighting spirit because of hatred. He vowed that he would make Chairman Park pay a painful price for all his dead relatives. On the other side, Tae-jun used a trick to get Ari into his arms. The two soon entered the wedding hall. The happiest person at this moment was Butler Kim, who had been thinking about how to turn the tables. And the saddest person was none other than Soya, who watched the man she had loved for more than 10 years marry someone else. She was heartbroken, but this kind girl did not blame Tae-jun, but wiped the tears of pain with a smile and wished him happiness in her heart. But Tae-jun's heart has always loved Soya. In order to be able to take revenge on Chairman Park, Ari was just a tool to him. In theory, Ari is the most pitiful person who does not know the truth. Soya used her excellent technical skills at the shipyard to create new products. This is also the biggest dream she has always had. Now that this dream has been fulfilled, it also fulfills Chairman Park's promise. Next, Soya did not hesitate to resign from her position at the shipyard. She found Hae-jin and wanted to go together to fulfill the next bigger dream. Jimin finally got the paternity test results between Soya and Madam. The results of this time show that the paternity between Soya and Madam is established. Jimin was surprised that someone really interfered with Madam and Soya behind the scenes. As a prosecutor, he quickly brought back the staff who originally did the examination for Madam. After some threats, the staff member confessed that Jinwoo had ordered it. Jimin then took Soya's paternity test and went to Madam to tell her the truth. Looking at the report in her hands that established her relationship with Soya, Madam felt both remorseful and heartbroken. Her daughter was right in front of her, but she never believed it. Madam contacted Soya's location and rushed there without stopping. The biological mother and daughter, who had been separated for more than 20 years, finally recognized each other at this moment. Soya called out, "Mom!" And Mrs. Park could no longer hold back. She wanted to make up for all the years she had denied her daughter. She tried to pull Soya back, but at that moment, Jimin hurried over and stopped her. At that moment, Soya's identity was revealed. If Park Chairman knew her identity, her life could be in danger. So Jimin told him that she had investigated and found out that Park Chairman had killed her ex-husband. Your wife learned the truth and broke down. And Soya also heard everything that her uncle said. She finally realized that Chairman Park was actually her own father's murderer. In the end, your wife thought that it would endanger Soya's life and could only reluctantly temporarily hide the truth. But Soya was very worried that her mother could not take such a blow. Her mother served the enemy who killed her ex-husband for more than 20 years without knowing the truth. Now that she knows the truth, how can she let her mother go back and face that man with a heart of a beast peacefully? But Madam understands that if she wants to live a happy life with her daughter in the future, she must endure everything now and return to Chairman Park to find the opportunity to seek compensation. After Madam left, Jimin had nothing to hide from Soya anymore. So she also told Soya that Hae-jin's parents and grandfather may have all been killed by Chairman Park. This made Soya's hatred for Chairman Park reach its peak. Madam, who had returned home, hid everything in her heart and treated her family as usual. She even went so far as to touch Jinwoo, who had previously switched the paternity report. But then, as soon as she returned to her room, she was overcome with pain. She had actually lived with these evil people for decades. The hatred that she was holding back in her heart could only be vented in agony against the pillow. She hated Chairman Park and Jinwoo so much that she wanted to tear them apart. But at this time, for Soya's safety, she could only hold back all her anger. With a common enemy, Soya hopes to take revenge on Chairman Park with Hae-jin. The two also finalized their final plan to take back the development rights to Chairman Park's oil rig. But it's easier said than done. At this time, for the two of them who are poor and penniless, it is like climbing to the sky. To develop an advanced drill, you must have a factory. While Hae-jin was in the middle of it, Soya gave a very good suggestion. That is to make a business plan first. As Hae-jin is a well-known designer, he will definitely find investors. Soya is experienced and the two of them joining forces again can definitely make a comeback. Hae-jin, who has found his direction, starts acting impish again in front of Soya. He complains to Soya that he suddenly has no inspiration for production and seems to lack something to stimulate him. Soya immediately fulfills his request and gives him a kiss. That day, Jinwoo made a big mistake and directly told Soya about her past. However, the first person to suffer after Soya's identity was revealed was Butler Jean. Faced with the threat of life and death, Butler Jean had no choice but to admit that he had given Soya to someone else back then. Thinking that Butler Jean was now his daughter's father-in-law, Chairman Park did not kill him. Instead, he warned Butler Jean that he must never let Soya's identity be known to his wife. Chairman Park was worried that Soya would always be a time bomb if she stayed in the country, so he took the initiative to ask Soya out and offered her a large sum of money to study abroad for further studies. At this time, Soya thought that Chairman Park was worried that she and Hae-jin would create advanced drills, so he used this method to get rid of her. Looking at the man who killed her father, Soya didn't want to say anything to Chairman Park and got up and left. On the other hand, although Madam was unable to effectively retaliate against Chairman Park at the moment, she could use Chairman Park to teach Jinwoo a severe lesson. Madam vented her anger by switching Jinwoo with Soya in another way, the paternity report. The anger of a mother who has raised her child for 27 years with all her heart and soul was so intense that Jinwoo was scared and ran away. Then the wife complained to President Park, who had returned, about Jinwoo's actions. The wife's deliberate protection of Jinwoo made President Park even more furious. President Park immediately found Jinwoo and punched him hard. No matter how Jinwoo explained that he was not the one who did it, his trust in his father's heart had long since vanished. Chairman Park absolutely would not allow anyone to hurt the woman he loved. He hated Jinwoo enough to kill him on the spot. At this time, Madam once again deliberately pretended to be a good person and tried to mediate for Jinwoo. Jinwoo could only helplessly leave the house. Then Madam pretended to be aggrieved and miserable, sitting on the ground and crying bitterly. Chairman Park felt immense pain in his heart and repeatedly apologized to Madam. At this time, Madam vowed in her heart that her revenge against the father and son was just beginning. But after that, Chairman Park once again became worried about Soya's identity. In order to keep Soya's identity a secret forever, he decided that Soya must disappear from this country. He then directly instructed his secretary to personally handle this matter. If he wanted to get rid of Soya, then the first thing he had to do was to distract Hae-jin. Hae-jin was told by the secretary's people that they wanted to tell him the truth about his grandfather's tragic death. The black-clad men tricked Hae-jin into a warehouse, where they knocked him out and locked him up. The secretary, on the other hand, used Hae-jin as an excuse to trick Soya into getting into the car. Soya didn't know that a danger was coming her way. Unexpectedly, Tae-jun at the company inadvertently learned from his subordinates that the secretary had gone to see Soya. He suddenly associated it with Chairman Park's previous plan to make a move on Soya, and when he thought about the secretary as Chairman Park's henchman, Tae-jun immediately knew that Soya was in danger at this time. He must not stand by and watch his beloved person suffer. Tae-jun secretly called Soya to tell her to find a chance to escape after the car stopped. The clever Soya understood and didn't say a word in the car. On the other side, Hae-jin woke up and escaped from the warehouse. From the mobile phone, he saw the message sent by Tae-jun that Soya was in danger and asked him to go to the airport. Hae-jin didn't dare to delay and immediately drove towards the airport. Soya followed the secretary and a few people to the airport and deliberately used the excuse of going to the toilet to find a chance to escape. The secretary told someone to follow her. Soya had no choice but to run as fast as she could. Fortunately, there were many cars in the parking lot, so Soya was not caught by the bad guys. Taking advantage of the gap, Soya hurriedly called Hae-jin for help. Unexpectedly, she was heard by the secretary, who was looking for her everywhere. Soya was, after all, just a weak woman. In the end, she was caught by a few men. The ruthless secretary did not show mercy to Soya. She severely tortured a woman. After the beating, everyone helped Soya up and prepared to take her to the car and send her out of the country. At this time, Hae-jin, who had arrived late, finally arrived at the airport. Perhaps it was the power of love that gave him strength. Hae-jin, like a god of war, beat the secretary and the others into submission. Soya was not idle either. She opened her mouth wide again and bit the other person to break free. Hae-jin took this opportunity to grab Soya and ran away as fast as he could. Fortunately, at the last minute, the arrival of the police made the secretary give up on this operation and escaped. The two rescued people saw that neither of them had been seriously hurt and hugged each other tightly. Chairman Park was furious at the secretary's failure. A simple matter had now been made so complicated. As things stood, Chairman Park could only tell the secretary to hide quickly. Soya, on the other hand, told her uncle about being kidnapped by the secretary just now. Hae-jin, on the other hand, speculated that Chairman Park must have known Soya's identity. Otherwise he would not have been so anxious to get his hands on Soya. Jimin couldn't stand by and do nothing while Soya's life was in danger. He immediately went to Chairman Park's office as a prosecutor to arrest the secretary. However, there was no direct evidence to prove that Chairman Park had ordered it, and the secretary had already gone into hiding. In the end, Jimin had no choice but to return helplessly. Madam nearly fainted when she heard that Soya had almost been killed by Chairman Park. Now they are all convinced that Chairman Park must have known the truth that Soya is the biological daughter of Madam. In that case, Soya is very worried that her mother will be in danger if she continues to stay by Chairman Park's side. She hopes that her mother can move out of that house. But Madam is afraid that extreme actions will anger Chairman Park and hurt Soya again. She just reassures Soya that she is safe now and will handle it. After today's kidnapping, Hae-jin and Soya's relationship has grown even closer. Soya has also come to accept this good man who is willing to go to any lengths for her. Hae-jin also responds to Soya's first deep confession. I have already lost my parents and grandfather. In this world, you are now my only one, and the reason I am now living a strong life is only you. Soya, who is not embarrassed at all, goes back to her room and covers her pounding heart. Hae-jin's face shows a happy smile, and when Madam, who has returned home, is thinking about how to leave this house, Jin-woo's appearance has helped her. Jin-woo, after being framed last time, hated his stepmother even more. In order to drive a wedge between his stepmother and father, he recklessly told his stepmother about Soya's background. Jin-woo's actions did succeed in driving a wedge between his stepmother and father, and the lady of the house could use Jin-woo as an excuse to move out. The lady of the house deliberately found Chairman Park in a rage and slapped him hard, and scolded him for knowing that Soya was his daughter but had kept it a secret. Jin-woo had just told her the truth. Then the wife directly packed her bags and prepared to leave the house. Chairman Park hurriedly stopped the wife and begged her not to be impulsive. The wife was unmoved and directly went to find Soya with her luggage. Butler Kim saw that things had escalated and hurriedly stepped forward to say that he would bring the wife back for her own protection. Who knew that he was directly slapped hard by Chairman Park? When she came out, she found Soya, and the two of them, mother and daughter, finally slept together after 27 years. They talked about the pain of separation over the years, while the adoptive mother was silently crying outside. Chairman Park felt that Tae-jun was an indispensable talent by his side. Otherwise Butler Kim and his son might have long since left this world. But Chairman Park's beating and humiliation of Butler Kim was essential. Unexpectedly, Tae-jun happened to be outside and heard the conversation inside, and also heard the painful screams of his father in the room. This made Tae-jun's hatred for Chairman Park grow even deeper. When his father returned, Tae-jun questioned him about who Eunju really was. At this point, Butler Eunju could no longer hold back his grievances and sat crying on the floor. Then he told how he had turned Eunju into Soya back then. He also told how Chairman Park had killed Soya's father. This truth shocked Tae-jun as well. The father and son then began to plan how to take revenge on Chairman Park. Butler Kim understood that it would be difficult for the father and son to defeat Chairman Park on their own, so they finally decided to tell Soya and his wife the whole truth. Only by attacking together could they bring Chairman Park to his death. Butler Kim has always felt deeply guilty about the accident that led to the tragic death of Soya's adoptive father. After all, Soo-jun had been his best comrade in the army. Butler Kim first found Soya and volunteered to tell her that he had been the one who drove the car that hit her adoptive father. He said that he had been forced to do it. Everything was because the terrible Chairman Park had threatened him. After hearing this, Soya was in pain and cried out, telling Butler Kim to get out of here. This terrible person. The suffering Soya went to the place where her adoptive father was buried. The appearance of her adoptive father still clearly appeared in front of her eyes. The once kind adoptive father who loved her was her entire world. Then Butler Kim found Madam and told her the whole truth. He said that Chairman Park threatened to kill her daughter in order to be with her. Since he really couldn't bring himself to do it, he gave the child to Soo-jun. Finally, he even told Madam directly that her husband was shot and killed by Chairman Park back then. Madam was in tears and in great pain when she heard this. She thought that it was all because Chairman Park wanted to get her that he killed her husband and daughter. But Butler Kim once again told her that Chairman Park wanted to get a mysterious film from Dr. Yoon. The film was the direct cause of Dr. Yoon's tragic death. This plunged the wife into deep doubt. In no time, the wife told Jimin the truth that Butler Kim had revealed. The two of them concluded that the mysterious film was probably the fuse that started everything. The wife decided that no matter what, she must find the film and find out the truth behind it, in order to take revenge. the wife had to suppress her inner pain and return to Chairman Park. The wife told Chairman Park that Soya was his daughter and that she must be given a share of the shipyard. As compensation for Soya all these years, President Park could only accept his wife's proposal. After this matter was settled, his wife ignored President Park and went back to her room. Jimin finally found the man that Grandpa Hae-jin saw before he died through unremitting efforts. This man was the only witness who knew that President Park had killed Hae-jin's parents and Soya's father. This time, Jimin, as a prosecutor, requested that the man attend a press conference and expose President Park's past crimes in public, because the statute of limitations for crimes committed 27 years ago. Jimin and the others could only discredit Chairman Park in this way. Chairman Park soon learned of Jimin's plan and was very frightened. In order to get Tae-jun to help him deal with this matter wholeheartedly and prevent the press conference, Chairman Park had to tell him the key relationship. It turned out that the film he took from Soya's father back then was actually an untapped oil field. For many years, Chairman Park has been vigorously developing equipment to extract oil, hoping to exploit that oil field. In this, Chairman Park was involved in secret funding from the government's intelligence agency. He is afraid that if everything he has done is made public, it will rise to the national political level. At that time, even if it has been 27 years, he will still be punished by the state secret department. So he instructed Tae-jun to find that former subordinate in advance at all costs to prevent this from happening. Ji-min, on the other hand, deliberately advised Butler Kim to attend the press conference tomorrow to testify against Chairman Park's crimes just to be on the safe side. Butler Kim hated what Chairman Park had done. Of course, he was willing to help with this. As for Soya, she was also preparing to attend the press conference tomorrow as a victim. In this way, her identity as the daughter of a chaebol would be made public. Soya was afraid that her brother and sister would not be able to accept it for a while, so she told them in advance. Over the years, her brother and adoptive mother have known that Soya has suffered a lot for the family. They told Soya to leave and enjoy her happy life. Soya understood that her brother and foster mother's intention was to prevent her from continuing to suffer in the family for their sake. After so many years of being close to each other, it was impossible for her to just give up on her family here. However, the next day's press conference had an unexpected twist. None of the two previous witnesses showed up. The two witnesses were present at the self-clarification press conference held by Chairman Park. It turned out that Butler Kim had told Tae-jun that he was going to attend Jimin's press conference, but was stopped. Tae-jun felt that a press conference could not do much harm to Chairman Park if his father attended the press conference. It would be like betraying Chairman Park again. Then Tae-jun's hard-won trust in Chairman Park would collapse. Then it would be even more difficult to take revenge on Chairman Park. So his father followed Tae-jun's advice and helped Chairman Park gain even greater trust. This way, they could find a more powerful weapon to take revenge on Chairman Park later. The other man, however, was Chairman Park himself. He personally came forward to threaten and bribe. As a result, the two key witnesses could only reverse the black and white and help President Park clarify that he was innocent. The two men instead falsely accused Jimin of being forced to say lies under his threat. In the end, President Park even condemned Jimin with righteous words, saying that he would make him bear criminal responsibility. In this way, the innocent Jimin did not get President Park but got himself into trouble. In resentment and anger, the investigation was stopped again. Subsequently, Tae-jun's plan to fight back against him was praised. But what Chairman Park and Tae-jun never expected was that Soya and Hae-jin actually had a plan B, which directly turned the unfavorable situation around and changed the course of the battle. At this time, the beautiful secretary anxiously ran in and told Chairman Park to hurry and watch the news being broadcast on TV. When Chairman Park saw the news, his face instantly changed. The TV was broadcasting a scene of him brutally threatening a witness. With the evidence being so conclusive, Chairman Park had to once again be investigated by the procuratorate. Ji-min, who had just been described as a villain, was happy as a child. It turned out that yesterday, when Hae-jin was discussing with Ji-min the matter of getting the witness to report Park to the prosecutor's office, he accidentally discovered that someone was secretly eavesdropping on them. Hae-jin immediately understood that his side might have been exposed. The location of the witness. Soya then pretended to be a hotel maid and entered the witness's room. While the witness was not paying attention, she installed a hidden surveillance camera in the room. As expected, Chairman Park found the witness and threatened him, and this scene was all recorded. So Chairman Park was taken to the prosecutor's office for investigation. At this time, Soya happened to come out and met the arriving Chairman Park. Hai unceremoniously scolded him. Subsequently, Chairman Park, who was under investigation, still denied all the crimes he had committed with the help of Tae-jun. However, Ji-min was not worried and brought back the witness who had escaped and brought him to the scene. The witness had no choice but to confess everything that Chairman Park had threatened him with. Chairman Park became agitated and realized that things had gone too far. He could only think of a way to get out of here first, so he pretended to be sick and fainted on the spot. Ji-min was not worried about Chairman Park running away when she saw him acting like this. but was laughing happily. Chairman Park instructed Taejun to stop Soya from developing the new drill during this time, and the public opinion against him in society at the moment made Taejun ignore it, thinking that it will subside with time. Jinwoo is overjoyed that his father has had an accident and is hospitalized. He originally wanted to take out his shares to cash in while his father was away from the company, but was told that his shares had all been transferred to Soya by his wife. Angrily, Jinwoo went home and vented his anger at his stepmother, but now he is at his wit's end with this stepmother and can only leave in disgrace, while his wife is indifferent to this ungrateful son. But what Jinwoo did next almost cost her daughter, because he was unwilling. Jinwoo went to Soya and forced her to hand over the shares that should have belonged to him. Soya's fearless and fierce appearance scared Jinwoo. This made the unwilling Jinwoo resent Soya even more. So in the evening, Jinwoo secretly went to Soya's office and tried to steal all the design data to take revenge. Unexpectedly, he accidentally dropped his lighter and set fire to flammable objects. The fire instantly engulfed the entire office. Jinwoo could only panic and run. Soya, who had just finished work and was preparing to go home, happened to discover the scene of the office on fire. In order to save the valuable data inside, Soya didn't care about the consequences and rushed straight into the fire. But the rolling smoke quickly made Soya feel suffocated and she fainted in the midst of the fire. At this critical moment, fortunately, Haejin came to pick up Soya and arrived here, and saw the burning office. Haejin didn't hesitate, and rushed into the fire without regard for his own safety. He was the first to find Soya, who had fainted. Fortunately, Soya was unharmed, except for a burn to her hand. Soya was hospitalized for a physical examination, but it was found that her blood sugar was particularly high. Haejin was very worried and told his wife about the result. At this time, the wife did not feel anything, and said that she also just found out about Soya's high blood sugar. However, when she arrived at Chairman Park's side, the wife realized the severity of the problem, because Chairman Park also had high blood sugar under the doctor's examination. The doctor told the wife that this disease can be inherited to future generations. It is best for the children to go to the hospital for a checkup soon. After hearing this, the wife's face suddenly changed. In order to hide her emotions, which she was about to lose control of, she hurriedly excused herself and ran to the bathroom. A long-buried past event was now on the wife's mind. It turned out that when she was young, Chairman Park was her ex-boyfriend. Chairman Park took advantage of her on impulse. This scene was just happened to be seen by Jimin, who had returned from military service. This was also the main reason why Jimin had hated her for all these years. Feeling guilty, Mrs. Yoon wanted to break up with Dr. Yoon, but Dr. Yoon did not care about the past and loved her deeply. He did not want to lose her. Mrs. Yoon was very touched and married Dr. Yoon. They had a daughter. At that time, Mrs. Yoon was very depressed and did not like the child very much, because she thought the child was the result of President Park's adultery, and Dr. Yoon knew the reason as well. In order to give the one he loved hope in life, he secretly arranged for a paternity test for his daughter and himself. The results showed that the daughter was indeed Dr. Yoon's biological daughter. This allowed the wife, who had been suffering inside, to accept what was in front of her, but there was not a trace of a smile on Dr. Yoon's face as he held his wife. Until this point, Soya and President Park both tested positive for high blood sugar, made the wife begin to doubt the authenticity of her husband's paternity test report from that year. In order to find out the truth, the wife went to Soya's ward and took the comb to do a paternity test with Chairman Park. The results of the test came out quickly the next day and were handed to the wife. The wife prayed silently in her heart, and then, without hesitation, checked the results in the test report. The paternity relationship between Soya and Chairman Park was 100% established. This result made the lady feel like she was in pain and didn't want to live. She threw the test report down and rushed to the bathroom, vomiting frantically. The test result was an unprecedented heart-wrenching pain for the lady at this time. She could imagine how much pain her ex-husband had endured to make a false paternity report. Soya then returned to the ward to look for her mother. However, she found the paternity test report on the bed, so she curiously picked it up and read it. Upon seeing it, Soya's eyes widened in disbelief. This was the test report that established her parent-child relationship with Chairman Park. Soya couldn't believe it for a moment and broke down. And the mother, who had also collapsed inside, felt even more pain when she saw that Soya had learned the truth. She could imagine the huge blow of pain that Soya was suffering inside at this moment. Not knowing how to face Soya, the woman ran out of the room with a heart full of pain. The truth was clearly stated in black and white. Soya couldn't believe it. How could the heavens play with her fate like this? At a loss, Soya sat on the ground and let out a heart-wrenching cry of pain. However, the truth is the truth and cannot be changed. Soya found her mother and hoped that she could tell her why this had happened. Even if it was painful, she had to know the truth. Her mother had no choice but to tell her what had happened between her and Chairman Park back then. She and Chairman Park had once been a loving couple, but then Chairman Park betrayed her. As a result, the two broke up. Later, she fell in love with Dr. Yoon. On the day Dr. Yoon was on a business trip, Chairman Park came to the house drunk and forced himself on her. Perhaps it was on that occasion that she became pregnant with Chairman Park's child. At first, I also suspected that you were Chairman Park's bloodline, but unexpectedly, Dr. Yoon forged your paternity report and proved that you were Dr. Yoon's biological daughter. Seeing how much Dr. Yoon loves you, I completely believed that you were Dr. Yoon's daughter. However, to this day, both you and Chairman Park have been found to have high blood sugar. This made me doubt again and do this paternity test. Soya learned that her mother was also a victim of suffering and did not blame her mother at all, but comforted her mother that this Kyoko identification report is meaningless, and she vowed that she would never admit that she is Chairman Park's daughter, and that her father is only Dr. Yoon and her adoptive father. Forget about what happened today, but how can I pretend that nothing happened when it is such a painful thing? Soya buried her pain deep in her heart and vented her emotions at work. She wants to quickly create advanced drills to take revenge on Chairman Park. Hae-jin, who does not know the truth, looks at Soya, who is a little crazy, and cares about her. Going up to stop her, he tells Soya to rest well to avoid causing irreparable harm to her injured hand. However, Soya does not want to tell him that she is Chairman Park's biological daughter. Soya, who is in a bad mood, immediately loses her temper with Hae-jin, telling him to leave her alone. At night, Soya is drinking alone. Jimin finds her at this time, from Soya's face full of pain and tears. Jimin immediately guessed that something must have happened to Soya that was a great blow. Soya felt deeply guilty and said sorry, under Jimin's constant questioning, asking him not to be so good to her in the future. This undoubtedly made Jimin even more puzzled. Soya then told him the whole truth. In this way, another person was also suffering because of the fact that Soya was Chairman Park's biological daughter. Jimin scolded her for hurting not only her brother but also herself because of Soya. Her only response was to clarify that she had only recently discovered the truth herself. It was your brother who hid the truth back then, which led to today's situation. Unexpectedly, this made Jimin feel even more pain. She had thought that after her brother passed away, Soya would be the only blood relative she had in the world. However, she was now being told that Soya was not her brother's daughter. In the following conversation between Jimin and Soya's adoptive mother, Jimin overcame his inner barrier. His adoptive mother told Jimin that she had come to realize that blood ties were not important. Although she had 3 biological children, the person she cared for most at that moment was Soya. Family members do not have to be related by blood to be family. They are those who stick together through thick and thin, who share sorrows, hunger and suffering. After hearing this, Jimin realized his mistake and cried like a child. Immediately afterwards, he immediately asked Soya out. Jimin no longer cared about blood ties or other constraints. His own brother loved Soya because of his love. His adoptive father also loved Soya because of his love. Why couldn't he love Soya because of his love for his son? Jin-woo, who caused the fire at Soya's factory by mistake, was arrested by Jimin. Jimin believes that Chairman Park instructed Jin-woo to deliberately set the fire to kill Soya. However, Jin-woo honestly confessed that his father had nothing to do with the fire. The wife also thinks the same as Jimin, that Jin-woo set the fire and that it was Chairman Park who did it. Thinking that her daughter almost died in the fire, the wife angrily pounded on Chairman Park's chest. This time, Chairman Park was indeed innocent. He did not instruct Jin-woo to do it. But no matter how he explained, at this time, the wife really didn't believe it. She was afraid that Soya would once again be at the mercy of Chairman Park and lose her life. The wife cried and told Chairman Park about Soya's background. Wanting to protect Soya, the wife decided that it was safest to use her own methods to bring down Chairman Park. On the other side, Butler Kim and Tae-jun were also plotting a plan of revenge against Chairman Park. Tae-jun told his father that the next step was the most critical moment, because the deadline for the use of President Park's reserve funds is only 1 month away. So the next step is to find a way to bankrupt President Park of all his assets, and then find evidence of his crimes and send him to prison, and finally take the opportunity to become the ultimate owner of the shipyard. As the saying goes, an enemy's enemy is a friend. Madam knows that Butler Kim wants to use herself against President Park. At this time, Madam bluntly told Butler Kim that since everyone's goals are the same, they should join forces to deal with President Park. And then Madam also found Tae-jun to once again confirm the common goal of working together to bring down President Park. However, at this time, the wife still asked Tae-jun for one thing, and that was to hope that after defeating Chairman Park, Ari would not be abandoned. Ari is a daughter that the wife has loved and raised like her own. She does not want to let innocent Ari suffer greatly in the end. After all, her brother Jin-woo has already gone to prison, but Tae-jun did not give an immediate response. Chairman Park finally ushered in the moment of fulfilling his lifelong dream. As long as he can present the newly developed drill at this bidding conference, he will win. However, Chairman Park does not know that he has already fallen into Tae-jun's trap. In order to make Chairman Park lose his fortune as soon as possible, Tae-jun persuades him to expand the shipbuilding industry to welcome this business. He hopes that Chairman Park will use the secret funds that have not been used. Soon, The bidding conference officially began. Soya also led the team to compete in the competition. Both sides have come up with the latest technology they have developed. Chairman Park did not expect that his lifelong dream was taken away by Soya, because his new drill bit was no match for Soya's. Chairman Park returned to his office and lost his temper. Taejun then told Chairman Park that the main reason for the failure was not that our technology was lagging behind. It was because your son Jin Woo had caused trouble everywhere and ruined the company's reputation, coupled with the company's unstable financial situation. This was the real reason for the failure. Taejun's main purpose was to let Chairman Park face this desperate situation. Taejun just wanted to force Chairman Park to take out the film that had always been hidden, which recorded the address of the oil field. So he came up with an idea. If Chairman Park could produce the film, he could turn the situation around. Thinking about this, Chairman Park once again became ambitious and confident. At this time, his wife at home had someone open Chairman Park's safe and find the film. After getting the film, his wife was about to leave when she happened to bump into Chairman Park, who had returned. His wife pretended to be calm and found an excuse to explain, then hurriedly left. When Chairman Park returned to the study to get the film, he suddenly realized, not daring to delay, he hurriedly followed his wife's car by car. Arrived at the local lady hurriedly walked into a cafe. Watching the lady handed the film to Soya after. Park. The president finally clear the lady knows everything, but he did not appear but depressed home waiting for the lady to return. After the lady came back Park, the president also no longer hide the sins committed, said what he did was just for her. In their own world, you are the most important lady. Even more than their own son you are also the most important. For you I have never seen any other woman. Even the most precious things can also not blink to give up. For such a confession. In the past, Mrs. Park may have been moved, but now she finds all this confession so laughable and despicable, betraying her own marriage to another woman, and then killing her husband and even her daughter, and saying that everything is for her own good. In Mrs. Park's eyes, President Park is nothing but a demon. But he disgustingly came to talk about love with her. Now that things have come to this, since everything has been revealed, Mrs. Park returned to her room to pack her bags and prepare to leave this President Park she hates so much. But President Park did not realize his mistake, and threatened that Mrs. Park must stay by his side, dead or alive. So, Mrs. Park went forward to stop him, and her impulsive action immediately made President Park realize his mistake. He hurriedly apologized to Mrs. Park and begged her again not to leave. Mrs. Park was unmoved and left with these words, "I will clearly watch how your life full of hypocrisy is destroyed." Then, without hesitation, she slammed the door with her luggage. This made President Park anxious but helpless. Later, Madam found Ari and told her the whole truth. Madam said that although they were not related by blood, if Ari ever needed help in the future, she would be there in time. Over the years, Ari had been Madam's spiritual support as she endured the pain of losing her daughter. Ari also felt desperate about her father's heinous crime. Her father had always been a proud figure in Ari's heart. Now all her beliefs had collapsed and turned to nothing. Ari told her father that from now on, she no longer wanted to see him. Chairman Park, at this moment of being deserted by everyone, finally began to be punished for his crimes. On the other hand, Haejin and Soya also faced a difficult choice. Since Soya learned that she was Chairman Park's biological daughter, she deliberately distanced herself from Haejin, because her biological father was Haejin's father killer. Soya didn't want to cause more pain and hurt to Haejin, so, at the candlelight dinner that Haejin had carefully prepared for his marriage proposal, could only hold back the pain and refuse Haejin's proposal. Haejin, who didn't know the truth, couldn't understand why Soya had rejected him. His heart was filled with pain. Ji-min, however, didn't want Soya and Haejin to be tortured by their true feelings for each other. So he told Haejin the truth that Soya was Chairman Park's biological daughter, and let Haejin make the choice himself. This truth plunged Haejin into deep pain. He couldn't understand why the heavens had to toy with him like this. On one side was a blood feud, and on the other was the woman he loved most in this life. Why did they have to put such things in the same choice? The two people who clearly loved each other were at a loss because of a demon. But does love someone need a reason? Haejin gave the answer here, and that is, love someone needs a reason. Haejin told Soya that without you, I really can't go on living. You have Chairman Park's blood flowing through your body. So what? You are the daughter of Dr. Yoon and Soo-jun, and Chairman Park is our common enemy. Doesn't it hurt when you reject me? Fortunately, Haejin made the right choice and Soya was able to untie the knot in her heart. What no one expected was that the film Mrs. Park stole was actually fake, and the real film was hidden in another place by Chairman Park. That day, Chairman Park took out the real film and wanted to realize his dream with it. At this time, Taejun, in order to exhaust all the funds Chairman Park had left, suggested buying the entire mining rights so that all the profits would go into his own pocket. But Chairman Park was hesitant. After all, buying the mining rights would use up all his assets and secret funds. Taejun understood that Chairman Park was already tempted and gave him a little boost. So Chairman Park asked Taejun to start negotiations with the other party. Under the huge temptation of money, The negotiator of the other company immediately agreed. Taejun's real goal was to find out where Chairman Park had hidden the secret funds. Since the negotiations were successful, he had to get the money out next, and also pay Soya's side of the penalty. Chairman Park had to gamble everything to realize this greatest dream of his life. Soon Taejun collected the records of Chairman Park's illegal use of secret funds. He had his men anonymously send them directly to prosecutor Jimin. Jimin was both happy and shocked to see the evidence of Chairman Park's illegal use of secret funds. With this evidence in hand, as long as the judge is not mentally ill, he is unlikely to lose the case, so he immediately ordered someone to start a more in-depth investigation of the account books. Although the account books were sent by anonymous courier, Jimin vaguely guessed that it might have been done by Taejun, but what Taejun never expected was that Chairman Park, who had been able to get to where he is today, was not someone to be trifled with. An old friend told him that the prosecutor's office had already begun a secret investigation into Chairman Park's secret funds. As soon as Chairman Park heard this, he immediately understood that someone was scheming against him. Chairman Park was really angry this time. He immediately gathered a group of subordinates and immediately arrested Butler Kim. Then he called Taejun to meet. After the meeting, Chairman Park didn't waste any words and directly questioned Taejun why he betrayed him. At this point, Taejun handed over all the evidence to Jimin, thinking that he was penniless. Chairman Park was no longer a threat. After Chairman Park is arrested, even if he is released after serving his sentence, what then? The entire shipyard will be his. He threatened that this is his punishment for the harm Chairman Park has caused him and his father over the years. Watching the arrogant Taejun, Chairman Park waved his hand and told his men to bring out Butler Kim. Seeing his father arrested, Taejun hurriedly tried to rescue him, but how could he possibly be a match for a group of thugs? In no time at all, Taejun was knocked to the ground. President Park, the betrayer, showed no mercy. He raised the stick in his hand and was about to take Taejun's life. At this critical moment, Ari arrived at the scene. Without hesitation, she ran over and fiercely protected Taejun. President Park was unmoved and was determined to kill Taejun, but Ari had already called the police when she arrived. Seeing the police arrive, President Park had no choice but to leave Taejun behind and flee the scene in a hurry. But the severely injured Butler Kim has been in a coma and his life is unknown. Chairman Park, who had left, then ordered his men to go directly to the lady. When they arrived at the hotel, they happened to run into Soya alone in her room. Park was already seething with anger, and when he saw Soya again, he became even more furious. He pointed at Soya and angrily cursed, "It's all because you didn't die back then that I've ended up in failure today." As he spoke, Park grabbed Soya's neck and tried to kill her again. He believed that if Soya died, everything would go back to the way it was. At this critical moment, Madam returned in time to stop him. Madam was worried that Chairman Park would brutally kill Soya. She had no choice but to tell him that Soya was his biological daughter. Chairman Park couldn't believe it and staggered out of the hotel. Soya, however, couldn't understand why her mother had to tell Chairman Park the truth. She had never wanted to admit that Chairman Park was her biological father. Her mother said that only by telling the truth and letting Chairman Park know what a mistake he had made, could he be punished for his suffering. To find out if what his wife had said was true, Chairman Park went to the hospital and asked for a copy of Soya's paternity report, which clearly showed in black and white that Soya was his biological daughter. However, at this time, Chairman Park was incredulous but also a little happy, because Soya really looked like him. Not only did she have the same dreams and hard-working spirit as him, but also became a talented person who mastered the top shipbuilding technology through his own efforts. On Taejun's side, he officially began his plan to take revenge on Chairman Park. At the press conference, he revealed to the public that Chairman Park had illegally used secret funds to kill his father. Butler Kim, who had been seriously injured by Chairman Park, even testified via video that Chairman Park had shot and killed Dr. Yoon 27 years ago. Butler Kim also took this opportunity to sincerely apologize to Soya via video. He didn't know what way to atone for his sins to Soya. He could only keep saying sorry, hoping Soya could forgive him. But then again, Butler Kim can be considered Soya's savior. If Butler Kim had listened to Chairman Park and ruthlessly killed Soya back then, perhaps Butler Kim would be living a better life than he is now. Through Taejun personally reporting Chairman Park, Soya finally realized that Taejun had been by Chairman Park's side the whole time, waiting for an opportunity to take revenge. The gap between the two of them instantly opened. Although there was still the same love between them, they both knew that they could only bury it deep in their hearts. In the end, Taejun handed over all the shares of the shipyard to Soya. Now that his revenge had been avenged, Taejun hoped that Soya and Haejin would go on to achieve even greater dreams. He himself said that he would leave here to find the light of the future. Soya returned, handed over the things to Haejin, and conveyed the words Taejun had said. Haejin hurriedly found Taejun and punched him as soon as they met. He directly blamed Taejun for not shouldering all the pain before and hiding by Chairman Park's side. However, Taejun also raised his hand and punched Haejin, but a happy smile appeared on the faces of both of them. Perhaps this is the way men express their affection. This allowed them to once again find the pure friendship of their childhood. Chairman Park knew that he could no longer avoid the law's punishment, and he is prepared to atone for his crimes. But the person he is most worried about is his beloved wife. The next day, Soya receives a package from Chairman Park. Inside her film rolls with the address of the oil field and a letter addressed to Soya. In the era I was born, every day was surrounded by war and poverty. In order to survive, you had to do whatever it took. Being able to win was a virtue in those days. But now, you are the first child to make me feel such defeat and despair. You didn't use any of the methods from our era, but defeated me with your own shipbuilding skills. Soya, you may not want to admit me as your father, but I will remember you forever, because you are my proud daughter. Soya could tell from Chairman Park's letter that he was leaving this world, and Chairman Park was indeed preparing to sleep forever in the place where his dreams took flight. Soya's timely arrival stopped Chairman Park's actions, and she hoped that he would bravely live on. A belated dad caused Chairman Park to shed tears of sadness. Park Chairman was speechless and left Soya to die. Soya finally acknowledged her biological father with blood ties. Time flies. A year has passed in the blink of an eye. Jinwoo was also released from prison and returned home. Madame returned to her true self and loved Jinwoo like her own child. And after Taejun disappeared for a year, Ari, who never gave up, finally found him in the countryside. In the past, Taejun's feelings for Ari were more of a means to an end, and now Ari's sincere heart has finally made Taejun admit this feeling. The adoptive mother's family Soya still regards them as her closest family. They are ready to follow Soya to enjoy a happy life, and Haejin has finally bought a diamond by saving and spending less this year and formally proposed to Soya. After going through so much suffering, the two have finally come together to work together to achieve even greater dreams.